Oregon City is a small town located approximately 30 kilometers from Portland, Oregon, in the United States. It is generally a peaceful place, but some areas face issues with disorder and high crime rates. The town has a population of about 30,000 residents, including families like the Ponds and the Gaddises. In 2002, the town's reputation was severely harmed by a series of shocking incidents. On the morning of January 9, 2002, 12-year-old Ashley Pond was getting ready for school. She had breakfast with her younger siblings and left her home at 8 a.m., heading for the school bus stop, an 8-minute walk from her apartment complex. She lived with her family in a low-income neighborhood, known for its industrial areas and frequent police presence due to domestic conflicts, burglaries, and other crimes. Ashley was a vibrant and talented girl who loved dancing and had plans to attend dance lessons after school that day. Her mother thought she would be home late because she had to attend dance class. However, by 6 p.m., Ashley still had not come home, which caused her mother to worry. First, she called the dance studio and found out that Ashley had not shown up for class. Growing increasingly alarmed, she began contacting Ashley's school and her friends. No one had seen her all day. Her friends mentioned that she hadn't even made it to school. This was unusual, as Ashley was a responsible and obedient student with no history of skipping school or running away. After exhausting all other options, her mother contacted the police to report that she was missing, providing a detailed description of her daughter. She was convinced Ashley hadn't run away and feared she had been abducted. However, detectives were initially skeptical. Ashley's mother had a troubled past. She struggled with alcoholism, had given birth to Ashley when she was only 16, and had several other children she often found difficult to care for. Some people viewed her as a bad mother, which may have influenced the initial reaction to Ashley's disappearance. Investigators initially assumed Ashley might have run away from her troubled home. However, many people who know Ashley do not believe that she would do that. At 12 years old, she is too young to make such a bold decision. Despite this, detectives did not treat the case as urgent. It was only after a week had passed that they began to suspect something serious had happened to Ashley. At that point, they started working on the theory that she had been kidnapped. Police reached out to her classmates, and, confirming their worst fears, they learned that she had neither been at school nor made it to the bus stop on the day she vanished. Over the following days, police searched the area around her apartment complex, utilizing trained dogs. Neighbors were questioned to gather any clues about her disappearance. Search teams, including community volunteers, were assembled, and detectives reviewed a list of approximately 90 local individuals with histories of abuse offenses. They also investigated suspicious residents known to have mental health issues and closely examined Ashley's online activity. Despite these efforts, no significant leads were uncovered. Complicating the matter is the fact that locals began reporting sightings of Ashley after she went missing. These claims were thoroughly investigated and dismissed as false. After a week of fruitless searching, authorities recognized the need for outside expertise. On January 18, 2002, 9 days after Ashley went missing, the police sought assistance from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. By this stage, investigators feared Ashley might not be found alive. The FBI immediately recognized the complexity of the case. There was no physical evidence, no witnesses, and no clear suspects. Ashley had seemingly vanished without a trace. A dedicated task force was formed to expand the scope of the investigation beyond the local area. Thousands of flyers featuring Ashley's photo were distributed, while law enforcement continued interviewing teachers, neighbors, and relatives to gather any potentially useful information. These efforts successfully raised public awareness, generating new tips from the community. Unfortunately, many of these tips ultimately led investigators down several dead ends. During the investigation into Ashley's relatives, detectives uncovered a disturbing incident involving her biological father. A year before her disappearance, her father had been charged with abusing her. For 3 years prior to the charges, he had been abusing her. Initially, Ashley did not even know her biological father, as she believed her stepfather, who lived with her mother, was her real dad. However, after her mother ended her relationship with the stepfather, she discovered the truth and decided to meet her biological father. Upon reconnecting with him, he took advantage of the situation and began abusing her. She visited him on weekends, but each time she returned home, she was visibly distressed. After enduring these visits for 3 years, she finally refused to meet him. Eventually, she confided in her mother, revealing what had been happening. Her mother immediately reported the abuse to the police. The case never went to trial because her father accepted a plea deal, which resulted in 10 years of probation. Investigators also considered him a suspect in Ashley's disappearance, but he was later ruled out after providing a solid alibi. Since April 2001, police have been called to Ashley's home several times for domestic conflicts and disputes. As the problems in her household escalated, she began spending more time at a neighboring house. Her classmate, 13-year-old Miranda Gaddis, lived there with her family. The two girls became close friends, attending the same school and frequently sleeping over at each other's homes. In August 1997, a man named Ward Weaver moved into a rented house on South Beaver Creek Street in Oregon City. His 12-year-old daughter, Mallory, became friends with Ashley and Miranda. All three girls were students at Gardner Middle School and attended the same dance class. Mallory's father, Ward, often drove them to school in the mornings. He is a 39-year-old man with a criminal record. He had previously served 3 years in prison for assaulting a nanny's child with a piece of concrete, and both of his ex-wives had accused him of domestic violence. At one point, one of Ashley's teachers noticed an alarming interaction. Ward kissed Ashley on the lips after giving her a ride. Concerned, the teacher reported the incident to the school principal. However, the matter was dismissed after the explanation that Ward likely viewed Ashley as a daughter and that the gesture was innocent. Over the summer of 2001, Ashley began spending even more time at Ward's house, sometimes staying there for extended periods. She even joined the Ward family on a 2-week trip to California. Upon returning from the trip, she confided to friends and teachers that Ward had harassed her. However, he denied the accusations, claiming that Ashley was lying and trying to defame him. He stated that he no longer wanted her in his home. Despite her allegations, no charges were filed against Ward. During the investigation, witnesses reported multiple instances of Ward behaving inappropriately toward Ashley. His daughter, Mallory, said there were times when he wouldn't let Ashley leave the house even if she wanted to. Despite these reports, authorities claimed there wasn't enough evidence to take action against him. Although Child Services received reports about the situation, Ashley refused to follow through with the complaints, making further legal action nearly impossible. After Ashley was eventually prohibited from visiting Ward's house, her emotional well-being, behavior, and school performance improved significantly. However, a few months later, she began visiting Ward's house again to spend time with her friend Mallory. By late December 2001, Ward's wife, frustrated with the circumstances, decided to leave their home. Less than 2 weeks after her departure, Ashley disappeared unexpectedly. Her sudden disappearance immediately raised suspicions. Ashley's close friend and classmate, Miranda, was a lively and outgoing girl who had spent most of her life in Oregon City with her family. From a young age, Miranda was considered attractive and dreamed of becoming a model. However, like Ashley, she faced significant challenges growing up. She had been abused as a child. Her biological father, although he never directly harmed her, had a criminal history involving the abuse of minors. Following their divorce, Miranda's mother entered a relationship with a new partner who faced numerous difficulties, such as coming from a marginalized background, having only a 9th grade education, and being illiterate. Tragically, this man was accused of abusing Miranda and 2 other girls. She bravely reported the abuse to authorities, leading to legal action in 1999. When Ashley went missing, Miranda became a key source of information. She showed immense courage by informing the police about the suspected abuse Ashley had endured, although her account was insufficient to clarify what had happened to her friend. Miranda and Ashley often confided in each other, sharing personal stories about their experiences with the Ward household and Miranda's biological father. Investigators suspected a connection between Ashley's disappearance and the allegations involving Ward. However, no solid evidence supported this theory. Meanwhile, rumors began to circulate that he had abused her. This led to the bullying and harassment of his daughter, Mallory, at school, deterring her from attending. Ward, angered by the accusations, denied the rumors. However, his ex-wife provided police with critical details, describing him as aggressive and difficult to handle. On March 8, 2002, 2 months after Ashley's disappearance, tragedy struck again when 13-year-old Miranda vanished. That morning, she said goodbye to her mother around 8 a.m. as her mother left for work. She planned to take the school bus, which arrived at 8:20 a.m., but she never made it to the bus stop. Her disappearance shocked the community. Just months earlier, Miranda had appeared on a TV broadcast discussing Ashley's case, pleading for her friend's safe return. Now, she had also disappeared. Family members clung to the hope that both girls were still alive and would come home safely. Miranda's case bore striking similarities to Ashley's. She was supposed to walk to the bus stop, but no one saw her on her way there, on the bus, or at school. By evening, her mother, panicked, contacted teachers, classmates, and the police. Detectives quickly noticed troubling parallels between the two cases. Both Ashley and Miranda were the same age, had similar physical features, and shared common interests, such as attending school dances. Miranda's mother insisted her daughter would never willingly talk to a stranger or run away. Known for being strong-willed, she was believed to have resisted an abduction unless the perpetrator was someone she knew. The disappearance of Miranda plunged the community into chaos. Residents demanded action, and the police were flooded with calls urging them to find the person responsible. Fear spread across the town as people began to feel unsafe, realizing a potential predator might be at large. In response, police formed a special task force and assigned 2 teams of investigators to the case. By March 15th, officers were actively following leads. However, it was revealed that a significant number of potential suspects were initially overlooked. Many individuals who temporarily or semi-permanently lived in the apartment complex where Ashley and Miranda resided were unknown to the landlords. Investigators identified 150 such people, some of whom were registered criminals. Authorities also conducted more thorough checks on local offenders with histories of abuse, about 900 in total, analyzing their possible connections to the disappearances. As weeks passed, one name repeatedly surfaced: Ward. His wife claimed that Miranda had angered him by warning local girls to steer clear of him due to his behavior. She suggested this might have been a motive for him to harm her. What is suspicious is that he gave a television interview in which he dismissed the cases, claiming that Ashley and Miranda simply ran away. Despite his questionable behavior, investigators consistently ruled him out because no evidence or witnesses directly linked him to Ashley and Miranda's disappearances. The property surrounding Ward's house had already been inspected by a dog handler and a specially trained dog. Later, an independent investigator requested permission to conduct a further investigation. Permission was granted by the homeowner, but the owner specifically asked the investigator to avoid a concrete slab that had been poured in a distant section of the property. Importantly, when the dog trainer brought the dog near the area, the dog indicated that there might be a body buried nearby. This information was submitted to the city police department in a report. However, since the dog handler was independent, further verification was required. Upon reviewing records, detectives discovered that Ward's father had a history of violent crime. He had buried one of his victims under a concrete slab in his yard. Despite this revelation, detectives did not launch a large-scale search of the property. Months have passed since Ashley went missing and there are still no clues as to her whereabouts. Many began to fear that the mystery of the 2 missing friends, Ashley and Miranda, would never be solved. Throughout this period, Ward consistently refused to provide any information. Unexpectedly, on June 30th, Ward agreed to speak with the media. He stated that he had no knowledge of what had happened to Ashley and Miranda, but admitted that he had become the primary suspect. The FBI identified several reasons for this. First, Ashley had previously accused Ward of molesting her. Second, he failed a polygraph test. Additionally, during questioning, he revealed that his father was on death row in California for murdering a girl and her boyfriend. Ward also shared details about his troubled childhood, stating that his father abandoned him at the age of 4 and subjected him to severe abuse. When Ward grew up, he reportedly directed his anger toward his younger siblings. Detectives suspected that he might have followed in his father's criminal footsteps. His media interview led investigators to reevaluate the evidence, reinforcing suspicions of his involvement in both disappearances. This prompted public outrage, with many questioning why Ward had not yet been arrested. Despite the failed polygraph test, the motives, and various suspicious circumstances, detectives felt they lacked enough evidence to charge Ward. Others had also failed polygraph tests, and Ward had allowed police to search his property multiple times, appearing cooperative. These factors contributed to the lack of action against him. By midsummer of 2002, police investigators were still hard at work, examining over 1,200 men for potential links. However, the case ultimately reached a standstill. The FBI announced a $50,000 reward for any information that could aid their investigation. The city administration contributed $10,000, and the owners of the residential complex where Ashley and Miranda lived added another $5,000. Despite these efforts, the search did not progress. Agents repeatedly appeared on television, urging citizens to report suspicious activity and highlighting the possibility that the girls might still be alive. However, these appeals yielded no significant leads. The breakthrough occurred on August 15, 2002. Meanwhile, Ward, who had been planning to leave town since early summer, packed his belongings and asked his son's 19-year-old girlfriend to help him move. After she helped carry his bags into his new home, he attacked her. He dragged her into the shower, forcibly removed her clothing, and abused her. He then attempted to strangle her, but she managed to escape. Wrapped only in a curtain, she fled the house. Realizing his plan had failed, Ward quickly packed his belongings and fled in his car. Terrified and aware of what had happened, his son, Francis, immediately called the police. Authorities stopped Ward before he could leave the city. He was arrested and charged with first-degree abuse. Due to concerns that he might flee if released, bail was set at $1 million. A week after the arrest, a significant breakthrough occurred. Francis, Ward's 24-year-old son, went to the police station and revealed that his father had confided in him before fleeing. Ward admitted to having done bad things and expressed a desire to escape. Francis suspected this was related to Ashley and Miranda but wasn't entirely certain. Following Francis's statement, authorities determined they had sufficient evidence to obtain search warrants and conduct an extensive investigation of Ward's home and the surrounding property. On August 23, 2002, a judge authorized a search warrant for the Ward property. Police sealed off the area and began a meticulous search, which was expected to take several days. On Saturday, August 24, law enforcement discovered a cardboard box containing human remains in a shed behind the house. Due to the condition of the remains, it was unclear how long they had been there, and identification would take additional time. Meanwhile, approximately 40 FBI and state police agents continued to examine the property. During the search, investigators determined that special construction equipment was necessary to excavate a concrete slab that appeared to have been poured after Ashley's disappearance. The following day, beneath the slab, they uncovered a barrel containing another set of human remains. Upon hearing this development, Ward's ex-wife expressed her outrage. She asserted that she had been convinced from the beginning that Ward was responsible for Ashley's death. Months before Ward's arrest, she had contacted the FBI, urging them to investigate him more thoroughly. She expressed fury that the delay in taking action may have allowed another victim, Miranda, to be killed. Authorities now believe that both Ashley's and Miranda's remains had been discovered on Ward's property. Ward's ex-wife also pointed out suspicious circumstances surrounding the concrete slab. She explained that the slab had been poured hastily in the middle of the night, immediately after Ashley's disappearance, which seemed unusual. Ward had claimed he planned to install a jacuzzi on the slab, but the jacuzzi never materialized. He never offered an explanation for the urgency of the construction. Within days, the remains that were found were identified as those of Miranda, Ashley's missing friend. The barrel contained Ashley's body. The hopes of their loved ones for their safe return were shattered instantly. Charges, including murder with aggravating circumstances, abuse, and second-degree abuse of a corpse, were filed against Ward in the weeks that followed. These charges were added to an existing case related to the abuse of his son's girlfriend. It also came to light that Ward might be linked to another abuse case dating back to July 2002. Prosecutors argued that the death penalty was warranted in this case. After analyzing the remains, investigators determined that both Ashley and Miranda had endured brutal violence, though the exact cause of death could not be established. Beatings, gunshot wounds, stabbing, poisoning, and strangulation were all ruled out. Ashley's body, mummified and frozen in a fetal-like position, was found fully clothed. A white rope had been tied in a specific manner around her arms, legs, and neck, resembling the position in which Miranda's body was discovered. Both bodies were wrapped in multiple layers of plastic and tightly bound. Investigators speculated that Ashley and Miranda had been kept in a freezer at the house for an extended period. Ward's fingerprints were found on the materials used to conceal their bodies. A toxicology report revealed that Ashley had a high level of alcohol in her system, equivalent to consuming 5 servings of whiskey or similar liquor shortly before her death. Miranda's body contained a lower concentration of alcohol. However, the exact amounts consumed remained unclear, as decomposition naturally produces alcohol over time. Ashley might have lost consciousness due to drinking, and it was believed that Ward had forced her to consume alcohol. It was later revealed that, just before Ashley's disappearance, Ward had attempted to get both Mallory's daughter and her friends Ashley and Miranda drunk. While the exact cause of Ashley's death could not be determined, the task force had to examine several possibilities to present in court. These included alcohol poisoning, suffocation, using a pillow, hand, or a technique that cut off blood flow to the brain, asphyxiation, confinement in a sealed container, or the use of rare illegal substances or poisons that were difficult to detect in toxicology tests. Following Ward's arrest, he continued to speak to reporters, proclaiming his innocence. He presented autopsy reports to support his claims, arguing that since prosecutors could not identify the exact cause of Ashley's and Miranda's deaths, they would not be able to prove his guilt. He also suggested that someone else might have buried the bodies on his property to frame him. However, the prosecution had substantial evidence against him, including accusations of abuse, Ashley's previous statement about harassment, testimony from other victims, and circumstantial evidence. Key pieces of evidence included Ward's fingerprints on the ropes and bags used to bind the bodies. Furthermore, prosecutors pointed out that Ward's father had been on death row for committing a similar crime. When the judge became aware of Ward's interactions with the media, a gag order was issued to ensure a fair trial. Despite this, Ward contacted a reporter, claiming that the judge could not stop him from exercising his free speech, a statement some interpreted as defiance. On April 22, 2004, shortly before the trial, Ward's lawyer submitted evidence suggesting that he had been mentally unstable at the time of his arrest. Ward had carved his daughter's name into his arm, inflicted injuries on his chest, and repeatedly banged his head during altercations. He maintained that he was being imprisoned simply for disciplining his daughter. A defense psychiatrist diagnosed him with severe depression and narcissistic personality disorder. However, the prosecution's psychiatrist argued that Ward was exaggerating his symptoms. Ward's erratic behavior in jail eventually led to his placement in solitary confinement. He was prescribed high doses of antidepressants and, due to his mental state, was transferred to a psychiatric hospital. The trial was temporarily suspended while professionals evaluated whether Ward was feigning his symptoms. By late summer of 2004, psychiatrists deemed him mentally competent to stand trial for murder and other charges. Fearing a death penalty conviction, Ward's lawyer negotiated a plea bargain with the prosecution, a choice supported by Ashley's and Miranda's families. On September 22, Ward pleaded guilty to 7 of the 17 charges against him, including murder with aggravating circumstances, abuse, and abuse of a body. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. As part of the plea agreement, the death penalty was dropped. After the sentencing, Ward's son Francie expressed relief, stating that he was grateful his father would never harm anyone or destroy lives again. However, Ward refused to disclose where and how Ashley and Miranda had died, leaving their families desperate for answers. In 2009, Miranda's younger sister visited Ward in prison twice in hopes of obtaining the truth. She believed this was the only way to find closure and peace. During the second visit, Ward admitted to killing both girls, describing how he had strangled them with his bare hands and buried their bodies on his property. Disturbingly, he boasted about successfully hiding their remains to avoid detection by authorities. Shockingly, he told Miranda's sister that if she had been older at the time, he would have likely killed her too. Ward was incarcerated at the East Oregon Correctional Facility, along with 4 other inmates. This section of the prison is specifically designated for individuals convicted of severe crimes, with inmates kept isolated from one another for safety reasons. Despite these precautions, the measures proved insufficient. On March 4, 2007, an inmate working as a barber attacked Ward. Inmate barbers in correctional facilities are required to use electric razors for safety, but he wielded a homemade razor and stabbed Ward in the neck. Security intervened, apprehending him and saving Ward's life. The exact motive for the attack remains unclear, though it is believed to be connected to Ward's criminal history. On February 14, 2014, Ward's son, Francis Weaver, who was 31 years old at the time, was arrested and later convicted of murdering prohibited substance dealers in Canby, Oregon. He was sentenced to life in prison. This crime marked yet another act of violence linked to the Weaver family, making it the third consecutive generation of men in the family associated with murder. In 2019, following an executive order from California's governor imposing a moratorium on the death penalty, Ward had his death sentence commuted to life imprisonment and was transferred to the general prison population.
On a seemingly ordinary evening in Bolingbrook, Illinois, an unimaginable event occurred. A woman was discovered dead in her bathtub. Her hair was wet, and there was a severe gash at the back of her head. Initially, it appeared to be a tragic accident, perhaps a slip and fall, but as investigators delved deeper, inconsistencies began to emerge. The most shocking revelation: the individual who may hold the key to this mystery was someone dedicated to protecting the community. What really transpired that night, and how did this case evolve into a startling tale of deception, manipulation, and betrayal? Kathleen Savio was born on June 13, 1963, in Glendale Heights, Illinois. She was the youngest of 4 siblings, was raised by her parents, Henry Jerry Savio and Mary Savio. When Kathleen was just 2 years old, her parents divorced. Later, her mother remarried, and the family moved to a different city in Illinois. Despite financial difficulties during her childhood, Kathleen was determined to create a better future for herself. She focused on her education, eventually became an accountant. Friends and acquaintances described Kathleen as warm, friendly, and charismatic, with a unique talent for connecting with others. At 20 years old, she went on a life-changing blind date with Drew Peterson. He seemed charming and was initially a great match for her. Drew worked as a police officer in the Metropolitan Area Narcotics Squad in Illinois, a job that brought him respect and authority. Drew was born on January 5, 1954, in Bolingbrook, a suburb of Chicago, and was raised by his strict parents. Drew was an older brother to 2 siblings. In high school, he stood out as an athlete and was known for his competitive nature. During his teenage years, he started his first serious relationship with Carol Brown. After graduating, Drew enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1974 and married Carol that same year. He was discharged in 1976 and the following year joined the police force in his hometown. Within a year, he moved to an undercover role in the Metropolitan Area Narcotics Squad, where he gained recognition. By the age of 25, he was named Police Officer of the Year. However, his personal life was troubled. Despite having 2 children, his marriage to Carol ended in 1980 when she found out he was unfaithful. Carol received custody of their kids. Known for his arrogance, Drew often boasted to friends about how easily he attracted women. In 1981, he met Victoria Vicky Connolly, and they married in 1982. Their marriage lasted almost 10 years until Victoria decided to divorce him in 1992, citing ongoing domestic abuse as the main reason. This claim was later supported by her daughter, Lisa Ward, who lived with them from ages 8 to 18. She reported physical and psychological abuse from Drew. Until later, a troubling rumor from their marriage involved an incident after they purchased a bar together. One night, after leaving the bar, Victoria was in a car accident that required surgery. Some sources suggested that Drew might have tampered with her brakes, but no solid evidence came to light. During his marriage to Victoria, Drew began an affair with Kathleen Savio, who was unaware of his marriage. To Kathleen, Drew appeared to be the perfect partner. He showered her with gifts and affection, took her on trips, promised her a stable future. Moved by his attention, she quickly fell in love with him. When Drew eventually told her he was going through a divorce, he portrayed his wife as a banned substance addict and claimed he could no longer handle the situation. Their romance accelerated rapidly, leading to their engagement just 6 months after their first date. On May 3, 1992, shortly after Drew finalized his divorce, they got married. Over the next 2 years, Kathleen gave birth to their 2 children, but their relationship began to change. While she focused on raising their family, Drew sought excitement outside the home. What began as a loving relationship turned unhealthy. Drew's charming exterior vanished, revealing a controlling and abusive nature. At first, his mistreatment was verbal. He insulted Kathleen's appearance, calling her unattractive and making hurtful comments about her weight. As time passed, his behavior became increasingly harmful, trapping Kathleen in a marriage that was far from the fairy tale she had imagined. Drew's aggression intensified. One day, Kathleen, feeling frustrated and tired from his continual absence and lack of support with their children, confronted him. What began as a heated argument quickly escalated into violence. Drew grabbed her arm and pushed her into a table, causing her to sustain a head injury and multiple bruises. The injuries were serious enough for her to go to the emergency room. Although the hospital recorded the incident, Drew publicly denied any wrongdoing. In a televised interview, he claimed that, as a police officer, he needed to act differently than an ordinary citizen to protect his job. Kathleen decided to stay in her marriage despite the challenges. Meanwhile, Drew turned his attention to a new relationship with a much younger woman named Stacy and Callis, who was nearly 30 years his junior. He was even bringing Stacy to the home that he shared with Kathleen and their children. On at least one occasion, he spent the night with her in the basement while his family slept upstairs. Stacy, born on January 20, 1984, in Downers Grove, Illinois, graduated high school early and began working as a receptionist at a local hotel where she and Drew first met. For a time, Kathleen was unaware of the affair, but that changed in October 2001 when she received an anonymous letter that revealed Drew's involvement with 19-year-old Stacy. Although Kathleen's marriage had been struggling, this news devastated her. She confronted Drew, who denied the affair. Distraught, Kathleen called her sister, crying as she shared that not only had Drew cheated on her, but he had also physically assaulted her during an argument by throwing her against the refrigerator. By mid-2002, Drew had moved out of their home and into a new house just a few blocks away, which many viewed as a deliberate act to provoke Kathleen. The divorce was quite tense as Kathleen fought over custody, child support, and her share of Drew's pension. However, Drew was unwilling to compromise. Kathleen was a strong and devoted mother who refused to back down easily. Their disputes escalated, leading to the police being called to her home at least 18 times, each report documenting domestic arguments. One particularly alarming incident occurred on July 5, 2002. According to the police report, Drew broke glass in the house and then forced Kathleen to sit on the staircase for hours while he stood over her, brandishing a knife and threatening her life. Kathleen felt increasingly unsafe, especially since Drew was a police officer in the same department that handled her complaints. As a result, her reports were often dismissed as typical domestic issues, and no serious action was taken against him. Fearing for her safety, Kathleen sought legal protection. On November 14, 2002, she wrote a letter to the state's assistant prosecutor describing Drew's worsening violence, urgently requested an emergency protection order before it was too late. She warned that Drew knew how to exploit the system and that she feared for her children's safety as well as her own. Despite the urgency of her message, her requests were ignored. Kathleen felt helpless, alone with her children, and trapped in a perilous situation. Drew officially married Stacy on October 18, 2003, shortly after finalizing his divorce. At 49 years old, he married a 19-year-old. Soon after, Stacy gave birth to their first child. Initially, she seemed happy in her role as a stepmother, even though Drew's eldest child was not much younger than she was. Their life looked ideal. They traveled often, hosted extravagant parties, and portrayed themselves as a loving couple despite their significant age difference. However, the initial bliss did not last. Drew's controlling behavior re-emerged, and he became obsessive towards Stacy, monitoring her phone, tracking her movements, and making unfounded accusations. Then, on the night of Monday, March 1st, 2004, a worried neighbor knocked on Kathleen's door several times without getting a response. Concerned, the neighbor decided to check inside and made a shocking discovery. Savio's nude body was found in the bathtub in the master bedroom of the Pheasant Chase Drive mansion. Naturally, Drew became the primary suspect, but he had a solid alibi. He was home with Stacy. He also stated that, as agreed, he had spent the previous weekend with his children and returned them to Kathleen on Sunday. Forensic investigators found no signs of forced entry or struggle in the home. Although Kathleen's autopsy showed bruises as well as a large, unexplained gash on her scalp, there were no defensive injuries. Authorities quickly classified her death as an accidental drowning without conducting a more thorough investigation. A significant detail was overlooked: the bathtub was completely dry when her body was discovered, raising further suspicions. The lead detective in the case was a close friend of Drew's, and his so-called interrogation of Drew resembled more of a casual chat between friends than an official inquiry. Stacy, supporting her husband, confirmed his alibi by claiming they had spent the entire weekend at home with their children. Kathleen's family was heartbroken by her unexpected death. Just days later, they held a touching memorial, honoring her as a devoted mother and a kind person. Shortly after this, Drew was awarded full custody of the 2 children he had with Kathleen. Stacy officially adopted them, creating the impression of a happy blended family. However, the facade of a perfect marriage soon crumbled. As time went on, Drew's controlling behavior became increasingly evident. By 2007, Stacy was fed up with his oppressive ways and seriously contemplated divorce. Then, on October 28th of that year, she disappeared without any explanation. Her sudden vanishing shocked her family, as Stacy had never shown any signs that she would willingly leave without informing anyone. Stacy's family began a desperate search for her and refused to give up until she was found. In contrast, Drew displayed little concern throughout the search process. During interviews, he made dismissive and sarcastic comments, implying that Stacy was merely enjoying attention and likely out dancing or with another man. Stacy's family suspected Drew might be involved, especially since she had recently told him she wanted a divorce, something he was unwilling to accept. As their suspicions grew, Drew tried to change the narrative by claiming that Stacy had changed a lot since her sister's death in 2006. He stated that she had been struggling emotionally and receiving treatment for depression. However, rather than clearing his name, these claims only heightened the investigators' concerns. Authorities began to question whether Kathleen's death was really accidental or if something more sinister was at play. Just weeks after Stacy went missing, both the Illinois State Police and the FBI reopened the investigation into Kathleen's death. In November 2007, Kathleen's body was exhumed for a second autopsy, which revealed findings that contradicted the original report. Forensic experts discovered clear signs of a struggle, indicating that she had fought for her life. As a result, Drew becomes the prime suspect in both the death of his third wife and the disappearance of his fourth wife. Instead of staying out of the spotlight, he actively sought media attention, appearing on talk shows and making arrogant, sarcastic comments as if he relished the notoriety. In January 2008, the case took a surprising turn when Drew's brother, Thomas Morphy, came forward with important information. He claimed that he helped Drew remove a large blue container from their house around the time Stacy disappeared. Several neighbors backed up his account, stating they had seen Drew with the container. Additionally, Thomas disclosed that he had assisted Drew in making a phone call from Stacy's phone, which made it look like she was at the airport shortly after her vehicle was found abandoned there. As the search for Stacy continued, the investigation into Kathleen's death advanced. On February 21, 2008, her death was officially reclassified from an accident to a homicide. About a year later, Drew was arrested as the main suspect. His legal team argued that they had a strong defense due to the absence of physical evidence, such as fingerprints, DNA, or eyewitness accounts linking him directly to the crime. As the trial progressed, accusations arose against the police department, with many claiming that Drew, having been a sergeant there, received preferential treatment and that the initial investigation was mishandled. This raised serious concerns about the integrity of law enforcement, suggesting issues of corruption and cover-ups. Exposing institutional bias alone did not establish Drew's guilt in Kathleen's murder. The prosecution needed a significant breakthrough. That turning point came when the lead prosecutor executed a strategic legal move that transformed the case. On May 31, 2012, Drew Peterson's trial began. The first witness was Kathleen's sister, Susan M. Savio. Her testimony deeply affected everyone in the courtroom as she recounted that Kathleen had confided in her about Drew threatening to kill her and make it look like an accident to avoid suspicion. Next, Neil Scory, a pastor and marriage counselor who had worked with Stacy, took the stand. He testified that Stacy had privately expressed her concerns that Drew was responsible for Kathleen's death. He recalled that Stacy once woke up in the middle of the night to find Drew missing around the time Kathleen was believed to have died. When Drew returned, he allegedly asked Stacy to lie to the police and provide him with an alibi. Further unsettling details emerged in court, including the fact that Drew had been present during Stacy's police interview, suggesting that he had pressured her to protect him. Additionally, the attorney who represented Stacy during her divorce revealed that Stacy had reached out to him just days before her disappearance, seeking legal advice about leaving Drew, and made it clear she believed he had killed Kathleen. Prosecutors claimed that Drew killed Kathleen out of fear that their divorce would leave him broke. For 3 weeks, jurors heard from 44 witnesses who shared disturbing accounts of Kathleen's case. One friend mentioned that Kathleen was so scared of Drew that she kept a knife under her bed for protection. After considering all the evidence, which was mostly circumstantial and based on witness statements, the jury, made up of 7 men and 5 women, deliberated for about 14 hours. Before the jury's decision was announced, Drew shouted that he was innocent. This caused Kathleen's brother to retaliate, accusing Drew of Kathleen's murder. Security had to step in to remove him from the courtroom. Ultimately, on September 6, 2012, Drew Peterson convicted of murdering Savio. On February 21, 2013, sentencing him to 38 years in prison with no chance of parole. Though he appeared calm during the trial, Drew's attitude changed in the following days. He directed his anger at the prosecutor who helped convict him. The prosecutor, however, remained unshaken and suggested that there might be further legal actions regarding Stacy's disappearance. Tensions escalated within Drew's legal team as his lead attorney filed an appeal, claiming that the original defense team had mishandled the trial. They argued that Drew was pressured into starting a media campaign before the trial, which ultimately harmed his defense. They also criticized the choice to call Stacy's divorce attorney as a witness, a decision that proved disastrous. Despite Drew's numerous attempts to overturn the verdict, the ruling remained intact. Kathleen achieved justice, but the fate of Stacy continued to be a perplexing mystery, with many believing that Drew Peterson held the key to the answers. While serving his sentence, Drew faced a new and shocking allegation. He was recorded in prison discussing a plan to arrange a murder for hire against the prosecutor who had led his case. He offered money to another inmate in exchange for carrying out the attack. In May 2016, he was found guilty of solicitation of murder and solicitation of murder for hire. He was subsequently sentenced to an additional 40 years in prison. Over time, Drew has maintained his innocence and persistently sought to appeal his conviction, arguing that the testimonies used during his trial violated his constitutional rights. In 2024, a significant legal development occurred when Drew's public defender requested a psychological evaluation to pursue a new trial. The judge instructed the county to conduct and finance the evaluation for Drew, who is now 70 years old. After a mandatory 30-day assessment period, the results showed that he was mentally competent to stand trial. At the same time, Drew's former attorney faced legal issues of his own, as he was charged with contempt of court. This situation arose when he allegedly breached a gag order by discussing the case in a nationally televised interview. During this interview, he claimed to have information that could clarify the circumstances surrounding Stacy's case. Although the lawyer denied the allegations, the judge reaffirmed the gag order, prohibiting him from publicly addressing the case. In the same year, Drew's eldest son, Stephen Paul Peterson, who became a police officer like his father, spoke out. He referred to Drew as his hero, highlighting that his father had always supported him and his brother. However, he confessed that dealing with the circumstances of Drew's conviction was extremely painful, making it hard for him to reconcile the loving father he had known for 36 years with the man accused of such terrible crimes. As for Drew's numerous appeals, none had been successful by that time. Stacy remained missing, and her family continued to hope that her body would eventually be found. They firmly believed that Drew was responsible for her disappearance and should be held accountable. This case generated significant public debate throughout the United States because of its many concerning elements. At its center was a police officer, an individual committed to protecting the public, who instead posed a threat to those around him. The chilling saga of Kathleen Savio's murder and Stacy Peterson's disappearance revealed a harrowing tale of abuse, manipulation, and betrayal orchestrated by Drew Peterson, a police officer entrusted with public safety. While Kathleen's justice was secured through a hard-fought conviction, Stacy's fate remains an unresolved mystery, leaving her family in anguished hope for answers. This case, marked by institutional failures and Peterson's brazen defiance, underscores the devastating consequences of unchecked power and the enduring pursuit of truth that continues to honor the memories of Kathleen and Stacy. Just after sunrise, a morning exerciser happened to witness a horrifying scene. A young woman was lying lifeless near the edge of a quiet neighborhood in Chapel Hill. There were no clues about what had happened, no sounds, no witnesses, just an eerie silence. Who was she? How did she end up there? And why did her life end so abruptly? As the police started to investigate, they uncovered a tragic story that would impact two cities profoundly. Eve Carson was born on November 19, 1985, in Athens, Georgia. She was raised in a loving home by her parents, Teresa and Bob Carson. She grew up with her brother Andrew in Athens, where her exceptional qualities began to emerge. From an early age, Eve distinguished herself academically and socially. At Clark Central High School, her remarkable intelligence and charm led her to become the valedictorian and the student body president, winning 55% of the student vote. These early achievements hint at the bright future she is on her way to creating. Eve's warmth, intellect, and leadership grew even stronger when she began her studies at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 2004. Despite receiving offers from prestigious universities like Princeton and Yale, along with scholarships, Eve opted to attend a public university. She believed in the importance of education and obtained a significant scholarship while pursuing a double major in political science and biology. Her goal was to build a career in the medical field. Outside of her studies, Eve engaged deeply in service and leadership. She led multiple student organizations, completed a challenging 4-year leadership program, and participated in outreach initiatives like Girls on the Run. Additionally, she spent time tutoring children in local schools and worked in underprivileged communities abroad through the Moorhead Cane Summer Enrichment Program. Her volunteer experiences took her to Ecuador, Egypt, and Ghana, where she served in various roles, including medical assistant and community educator. Eve was not just a student leader, she was a beloved figure in her community. Friends admired her, faculty respected her. Her lively spirit made a positive impact wherever she went. However, in March 2008, everything changed. Eve was last seen at home around 1:30 a.m. after deciding to stay in and study while her housemates went out. Sometime between that moment and early morning, she faced an unimaginable tragedy. By 5 a.m., she was missing. Later that morning, authorities found her car at the intersection of North Street and Hillsborough Street in Chapel Hill, following the tip. Tragically, her body was found just a mile from her home. She had been shot and left. Investigators were initially confused by the case. The motive was unclear, and the incident seemed random. With no immediate suspects, law enforcement began examining phone and bank records for clues. A key piece of evidence in the investigation emerged when Eve's abandoned SUV was discovered. Authorities believe Eve Carson was shot multiple times around 5:30 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, with one bullet striking her close range in the right temple. To advance the investigation, Chapel Hill police announced a $25,000 reward for any information that could lead to her killer's arrest. Forensic specialists found that the last activity on Eve's computer occurred at 3:37 a.m., which helped narrow down the time frame in which she might have been abducted. Just 21 minutes later, at 3:55 a.m., her debit card was used at an ATM in University Mall, Chapel Hill. The ATM recorded several transactions, including one that successfully withdrew the maximum daily limit of $700, while 5 additional attempts failed. Fortunately, the ATM surveillance system captured grainy images of the person using the card. The footage showed a young male wearing a black hoodie and cap, and in one frame, there seemed to be a second figure in the back seat of the car, possibly Eve, although the image was too unclear to confirm. At 4:44 a.m., another attempt was made to withdraw money, but no cameras captured the event. Less than 30 minutes later, Eve was shot and killed. However, her debit card was used again that day at 12:39 p.m., with 2 transactions made at a mini-mart on Moorhead Avenue in Durham. Over the next 2 days, several more suspicious transactions occurred, leading to a crucial piece of evidence. On March 7th, at 12:54 a.m., another surveillance camera captured another man attempting to use Eve's card. This individual was clearly not the same as the person filmed at the University Mall ATM, making him a second key suspect. The failed transaction and the clear video footage became pivotal moments in the investigation. As police worked to identify the individuals involved, the communities of Chapel Hill and Athens came together in grief. Eve Carson was buried on March 9, 2008, and her funeral was attended by hundreds of people. At the University of North Carolina, thousands paid their respects with a moment of silence. Initially, the investigation progressed slowly, despite having several images of the suspects. However, on March 12, just 1 week after Eve's murder, authorities received a promising tip. They identified a man who resembled a suspect from the surveillance video as 21-year-old Demario James Atwater. Atwater had a troubled past, with 2 prior felony convictions, making him familiar with the criminal justice system. He had violated parole and committed additional offenses while under supervision, and he was due to appear in court just 2 days before Eve's murder. His criminal record included charges for assault, robbery, trespassing, and banned substance possession with intent to distribute. He had also been caught with a firearm while on probation, but due to an administrative mistake, his court hearing was postponed past the date of Eve's death. Additionally, Atwater's home on Rosedale Avenue in Durham was located close to the crime scene. The investigation picked up momentum when detectives linked Atwater to Lawrence Alvin Lovett Jr., 17, a young man who closely resembled the person seen on the University Mall ATM footage. Both were school dropouts from Durham and had attended the same school, making their connection concerning. Atwater and Lovett became the main suspects in a case that shocked 2 communities and left a significant void for those who knew and respected Eve Carson. On the morning of March 12, 2008, authorities took action. After gathering substantial evidence and appealing to the public for information, police arrested 21-year-old Demario in Durham, charging him with the first-degree murder of Eve Carson. The case was developing quickly. Chapel Hill's mayor acknowledged the progress made but reminded the public of the profound grief that enveloped the town. A cherished student was lost, and the community was still struggling to cope with her absence. Lovett was eventually found and charged alongside Atwater. Although he was a minor, Lovett had a prior criminal record that included probation for theft and breaking and entering. Both he and Atwater was clear video evidence connecting them to ATM transactions made with Eve's card. The investigation reached a crucial stage in late March when a grand jury indicted both men on multiple serious charges, including first-degree murder, first-degree kidnapping, armed robbery, possession of a firearm by a felon, felony larceny, and possession of stolen property. Lovett faced additional legal issues as he was also charged in connection with the earlier murder of 29-year-old Abhijit Mahato, a Duke University graduate student from India. Mahato had been kidnapped from his home on January 18, 2008, just weeks before Eve's death. He was forced to withdraw cash from an ATM and was later shot while returning home. There were many similarities between this case and Eve's, but the evidence linking Lovett to Mahato's murder was not strong enough, leading to his acquittal. Abhijit Mahatto's murder remains unsolved to this day. The legal proceedings in Eve Carson's case have started in earnest. Prosecutors decided to try Atwater and Lovett separately. Atwater, being an adult, faced the possibility of the death penalty, while Lovett, due to his age at the time of the crime, could not receive that sentence. The prosecution began to piece together a disturbing account of events that took place in the early hours of March 5, 2008, a crime driven by greed and chance. Around 1:30 a.m., Eve remained at home to study while her roommates went out. Atwater and Lovett then saw Carson walking toward her car. They stormed into Carson's car with Lovett in the driver's seat and Atwater in the back seat. They forced she into the back seat, where Atwater held her hostage at gunpoint. Investigators concluded that the two were looking for an easy target. Both had been released on bond, were low on money, and had no prior connection to Eve. She was just a stranger they happened to encounter. This marked the start of a tragic series of events that would lead to a brutal and senseless murder. Digital records show that Eve Carson's computer was last active at 3:37 a.m. on March 5, 2008. Shortly after, her life took a tragic turn when she was kidnapped by Atwater and Lovett. They put her in the back seat of her own SUV and drove to several ATMs to withdraw cash. Surveillance cameras captured them at an ATM. Their second attempt at 4:44 a.m. at mall failed because they had already reached Eve's daily withdrawal limit. Lovett told a friend that throughout the ordeal, Carson tried to reason with her captors, telling them that they did not have to do what they were doing. She also begged for her life, telling them that they could take whatever they wanted and that they did not have to kill her. However, Lovett and Atwater decided to kill Carson because she had seen their faces. They took her to a wooded area about a mile from UNC to commit the murder. Carson had been shot 5 times. She was first attacked in the right shoulder, right upper arm, right buttock, right cheek with a .25 caliber pistol. Blood found in Carson's lungs during an autopsy showed that she was still alive and breathing after being attacked with the pistol. The 5th and fatal shot she received was from a sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun. It went through her right hand, suggesting she was trying to shield herself, into her right temple and brain. According to a forensic psychologist and crime analyst, the way Carson was shot showed a complete lack of respect for others. After his arrest, Demario James Atwater confessed to his involvement in the crime. He confirmed that he was captured on the ATM footage and identified Lovett as his accomplice. To avoid going to trial, Atwater pleaded guilty to all federal charges and directly apologized to Eve's parents during sentencing. On September 23, 2010, he was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years, thus escaping the death penalty. In contrast, Lovett decided to fight the charges against him. He pleaded not guilty to various state offenses, including first-degree murder, kidnapping, armed robbery, larceny, and possession of stolen property. His trial began in December 2011. After 2 weeks, the jury found him guilty on all counts, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Complications arose soon after. In 2013, the North Carolina Court of Appeals overturned Lovett's sentence, referencing a U.S. Supreme Court decision that deemed mandatory life sentences for juveniles unconstitutional. Lovett was 17 years old at the time of Eve's murder, which prompted a new sentencing hearing. During this hearing, Lovett spoke to the court, expressing remorse for his actions and acknowledging the pain he had caused. He argued that he was not the monster he was portrayed to be. However, the court upheld its previous decision, sentencing him once more to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a decision many felt was justified due to the severity of the crime. Since being incarcerated, Lovett has received several disciplinary infractions, indicating limited progress in his rehabilitation. Despite being a minor at the time of the murder, he has continued to display violent and disruptive behavior while in prison. There were further ripples tied to this case. Months after Diario's arrest, his stepbrother Shelton was fatally shot while leaving a party. Unlike Diario, Shelton was not involved in criminal activity, and his death devastated their family, particularly their mother, who, in less than a year, lost both sons in different tragedies. Eve's murder also cast a harsh light on failings within the criminal justice system. At the time of her death, both Lovett and Atwater were on probation and had repeatedly violated the terms of their release. Probation officers failed to respond effectively, even after discovering that Atwater had breached conditions multiple times. In February 2008, an arrest warrant was finally issued for Atwater, and he was taken into custody, but he posted a $10,000 bond and was released just days before Eve's murder. His court date had been scheduled for March 3rd, but was delayed due to administrative errors. 2 days later, Eve was dead. Authorities believe that the desire to recover his lost bond money was a key motivation for Atwater's involvement in the robbery. It is deeply frustrating that a series of bureaucratic failures allowed two dangerous individuals to remain free. The consequences were irreversible. Eve Carson was more than a victim, she was an exceptional young woman whose light touched countless lives. Intelligent, joyful, and driven, she dedicated herself to public service, education, and global outreach. Her legacy of compassion and leadership lives on. In her honor, the University of North Carolina established the Eve Carson Scholarship. The award, designed by students and approved posthumously, reflects Eve's own vision for helping others achieve their potential. It is granted annually to two juniors who demonstrate the same commitment to service, leadership, and academic excellence. Eve was considering graduate studies in science policy. Her future was bright, but that story was stolen. For all her achievements, it is the character of Eve Carson that continues to resonate. In her final moments, she chose to respond to hatred with compassion, asking her killers to pray. Even in fear, she embodied grace. Though her life was ended for less than $1,500, her impact was and remains immeasurable. The murder of Eve Carson in March 2008 was more than a singular act of violence. It was a seismic event that shattered the tranquility of Chapel Hill and Athens, exposing the fragility of life and the consequences of systemic shortcomings. Eve, a young woman of boundless potential, embodied the best of humanity: intelligence, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to making the world better. Her senseless death, driven by greed and indifference, left communities grappling with grief and questions that linger to this day. Yet, from this tragedy emerged a powerful testament to her character and influence. The investigation and prosecution of her killers, Demario James Atwater and Lawrence Alvin Lovett Jr., brought a measure of justice, but it also laid bare the failures of a criminal justice system that allowed two individuals with troubled histories to remain free. The bureaucratic oversights that enabled their actions underscore the need for vigilance, reform, and accountability. Eve's death became a catalyst for change, prompting North Carolina to overhaul its probation system and sparking broader conversations about safety and prevention. Her loss was a clarion call to address the cracks in the systems meant to protect us, ensuring that such tragedies are not repeated. Eve Carson's legacy is a challenge to us all, to live purposefully, to serve selflessly, and to confront injustice with resolve. Her life, though tragically brief, was a masterpiece of impact, and her memory continues to shape a better future. Shannon Graves was born on November 4, 1988, in Ohio, USA. She was raised by her mother, a single mother. Everything changed when her mother met Ronnie DePaul, who became a father figure in her life. Ronnie treats her like his own daughter, and she quickly takes a liking to him. She was known for her kind heart and loving nature. In 2016, Shannon proudly earned her cosmetology license, marking a new beginning after a challenging childhood. Her friends affectionately called her Star, recognizing her free spirit, honesty, and selflessness. However, Shannon's compassionate nature sometimes led her to make poor choices in relationships. Following her mother's death, she struggled with substance abuse. Her close friends observed that she often fell for the wrong men, whether due to bad luck or her attraction to rebellious personalities. Despite these challenges, Shannon was determined to take control of her life. Her professional achievements filled her with hope for a brighter future. Unfortunately, Shannon's intuition was wrong when she became involved with Arturo Novoa. He is of Puerto Rican descent, charming and passionate about music, but he is also very secretive about his life. This secrecy likely stemmed from his lengthy criminal history, which began in 2004 with arrests for assault and property damage. A few months later, he faced charges of escaping from prison and obstructing public service. In 2006, he was charged with felony fleeing after a police chase, followed by aggravated arson charges. After serving his prison term, he was arrested again for trespassing in 2008 after being evicted from his residence. In 2010, he faced additional charges related to weapons and unlawful entry. Court records indicate that he was a man addicted to criminal activity and made a living by illegal means. When Shannon and Arturo began dating in the summer of 2016, everything seemed to be going well. She introduced him to her family and started spending more time at his home. That same year, she got a puppy, which brought her joy and companionship. During the holiday season, she celebrated with her family, enjoying food, laughter, and gift exchanges. This gathering would unknowingly be the last time the family would be together. 2 months later, while with Arturo, Shannon briefly encountered her sister, Debbie DePaul. They discussed Debbie's upcoming birthday in March, for which Shannon was already making plans. However, when the day came, she did not attend, an unusual absence. Initially, her family thought she was just busy and would arrive later, but she never came. Alarmingly, she did not call or send a message, not even to wish Debbie a happy birthday. When she also missed the Easter gathering the following month, concern grew. As time passed, her family's anxiety increased. After calling and texting several times without receiving a response, Ronnie attempted to contact Arturo. He claimed that he and Shannon had broken up and that she had moved to Cleveland with someone else. However, when Ronnie and Debbie tried to contact her directly, they were unsuccessful. Determined to find her, they went to her apartment, but found no clues. Her car and phone were there, but her beloved dog was missing. Around this time, Arturo was arrested on charges related to banned substances. In the following weeks, Shannon's family was engulfed in fear and uncertainty. In June, Debbie officially reported her as a missing person to the police. In their report, family members acknowledged Shannon's past struggles with addiction but highlighted that she had never gone this long without contacting them. Authorities requested anyone with information to come forward while they searched hospitals and jails, but there was still no trace of Shannon. Investigators found tracking her whereabouts to be extremely challenging, especially since she had been missing for months. They filed a request for her phone records and began looking into her personal life, noting that she often spent long periods of time with her boyfriend, Arturo, before her disappearance. The police subsequently interviewed Arturo. He recounted the same story he had told Ronnie, adding complexity to the case. Without a clear timeline for Shannon's disappearance, they could not confirm Arturo's alibi. Additionally, there was no evidence of a new boyfriend with whom Shannon had supposedly moved in. As suspicions rose, detectives learned about an ex-boyfriend named John, and considering this lead, they decided to investigate him further. John, a business owner, had a criminal past involving trafficking of banned substances. His incarceration had led to his breakup with Shannon, as her friends remembered how distressed she was upon learning of his conviction. Complicating matters, John had been released from prison shortly before Shannon was reported missing. When police found and interviewed him, he claimed he hadn't seen her since February, when she mentioned getting back together with Arturo. His statement implied that her relationship with Arturo may not have been as perfect as it seemed. Still, John admitted that he had lingering feelings for her at the time of their last conversation. With 2 potential suspects but no clear evidence, police were having a hard time getting their case off the ground. When Shannon's phone records were finally released, investigators hoped to glean vital information. Unfortunately, these records only confirmed that she had gone to work as usual in late February before her phone was suddenly turned off. The number had since been reassigned to someone else, and around that same time, all activity on her credit cards also came to a halt. The investigators had no idea that the answer to the case was about to emerge, but in the most frightening way. On July 30th, a man from Youngstown called 911 to report a shocking discovery. He told the operator that he had found human remains inside black garbage bags, and most disturbingly, the head was missing. Upon receiving the signal, rescue workers notified the police, who quickly arrived at the home of the caller, Kenny Eschenbaugh and his wife, Jill. While forensic experts investigated the remains, Kenny and Jill were brought in for questioning. According to their testimony, the freezer containing the body parts belonged to a friend. A week prior, this friend had asked Kenny and Jill to store it in their basement, claiming it was filled with meat he didn't want to spoil. On July 29th, Jill decided to cook spaghetti and meatballs for dinner and thought she could use some meat from the freezer, planning to replace it later. However, when she approached the freezer, she found it locked. Assuming their friend was just being eccentric, she used a screwdriver to pry it open. To her horror, instead of meat, she found bags filled with what turned out to be human remains. Feeling nauseated, she quickly shut the freezer and called for Kenny. Together, they cautiously opened one of the bags and discovered a human foot. Since Kenny and Jill's stories matched perfectly when questioned separately, they were quickly ruled out as suspects. Investigators then turned their attention to the friend who had left the freezer in their home, named Anthony Gonzalez. Kenny explained that he had met Anthony 4 years earlier through a mutual friend, bonding over their shared interest in music. Although they hung out occasionally, Kenny found Anthony to be unpredictable and sometimes aggressive. Despite being cooperative, the identity of the victim remained a mystery until forensic experts discovered a scorpion tattoo on one of the feet, matching a tattoo belonging to Shannon, a woman who had recently disappeared. While more tests were planned, it increasingly appeared that the remains belonged to her. This left investigators with a concerning question: how and when was Shannon placed in the freezer? Shortly afterward, the lead prosecutor in Ohio held a press conference to discuss this chilling case, which was rapidly becoming one of the most disturbing in recent history. Although the medical examiner couldn't determine the cause of death without the victim's head, Shannon was positively identified through fingerprint analysis. Her family was heartbroken to learn the truth about their beloved daughter, discovering that her fate was far worse than they had ever imagined. Shannon's family and friends gathered in a local park for a candlelight vigil to remember her. Debbie, one of the attendees, told reporters that she believed Shannon has found peace. The vigil was intended to celebrate Shannon's life rather than to focus on sadness. Many people lit candles and released lanterns while wearing shirts with messages honoring Shannon. However, Shannon's family was visibly pained. Ronnie, too devastated to appear on camera, shared his indescribable grief, explaining that he loved Shannon as a daughter and sought justice for her. In the meantime, investigators ramped up the search for Anthony. They soon discovered that Anthony Gonzalez was just an alias. His real name matched the identity of someone they had already suspected, Arturo Novoa. Authorities learned that Arturo had been dating a woman named Katrina Layton, who moved into his house shortly after Shannon was last seen. Given Arturo's lengthy criminal history, the police acted quickly, arresting both him and Katrina and searching their home. The police found red stains on the walls, a knife, and a manual for the freezer where Shannon's remains were located. Kenny, who previously believed his friend's name was Anthony, was shocked to learn Arturo's true identity. He wasn't the only one confused. Arturo often used different names, possibly to conceal his past involving activities related to banned substances. During questioning, Arturo remained composed, repeatedly denying any connection to Shannon's death and claiming ignorance about her whereabouts. He also distanced himself from the freezer. Katrina supported his claims, but their story began to unravel when police discovered a key among her belongings that fit the freezer's lock, linking them to the crime and ensuring they remained in custody. As the investigation continued, Shannon's ex-boyfriend John played a crucial role in uncovering additional information. He spoke to Shannon's friends and learned about a bonfire attended by Arturo. A witness reported that Arturo used the fire to burn personal items and, when questioned, he claimed they were Shannon's clothes, which he burned as revenge for alleged infidelity. That night, he was with his friend Andrew Herman, and they both continued to burn clothing. Investigators later searched the bonfire site and found remnants, including a bracelet that belonged to Shannon. As the investigation progressed, authorities contacted a woman named Jamie, who knew Andrew and his wife, Michelle Eilenfeld. Jamie reveals that Arturo and Katrina were behind Shannon's murder, while Andrew helped handling the body of her body. Jamie stated that Katrina had harbored jealousy towards Shannon for a long time, and that Shannon felt the same way about her. The situation became more complicated when neighbors reported seeing Katrina walking Shannon's dog and using her credit card to make small purchases, suggesting that Katrina had taken over a part of her life. Amid these incidents, Ronnie passed away unexpectedly without witnessing justice. Debbie, overwhelmed with sorrow, sought therapy while caring for her younger brother and Shannon's cherished dog. Meanwhile, Andrew and Michelle were placed in pretrial detention. Authorities gathered a wealth of evidence that Michelle had threatened witnesses, interfered with the investigation, and covered up the crime. As the case went to the jury, the truth of what happened became clearer. On February 24, 2017, Arturo killed Shannon, likely with Katrina present. He later called Andrew to assist him in handling the body. They disposed of her head, stored other body parts in their freezer, and discarded some remains in an undisclosed location that authorities have yet to find. The prosecutor stated that Arturo was merely a small-time dealer of banned substances, acting out of jealousy over Shannon's finances. Katrina, on the other hand, wanted Shannon to keep her distance so she could pursue a relationship with Arturo. Facing the death penalty, the four defendants ultimately accepted plea deals. Arturo Novoa received a life sentence for murdering Shannon. Katrina Layton was sentenced to 18 years, Andrew Herman to 12 years, and Michelle Eilenfeld to 2 years. Arturo attempted to appeal his sentence, but it was upheld. To keep the memory of Shannon alive, Debbie created a social media page dedicated to her younger sister, where she frequently shares pictures of her pet dog. She frequently visits Shannon's grave, where she has established a special ritual. After cutting the grass, Debbie spray paints a large pink heart next to the headstone, which was Shannon's favorite color. In a local interview a few years later, Debbie recalled the devastating call she received about the partial discovery of Shannon's remains. Currently, the investigators who helped convict Arturo are still searching for the missing parts of Shannon's remains. Debbie remains hopeful that they will be found someday as she continues to honor her sister's memory through her dedicated online tribute. Teenage years can be a particularly vulnerable time in a person's life. During this period, individuals transition from childhood to adulthood. They might appear innocent and carefree, but they often hold on to secrets, maybe out of fear or embarrassment. Sometimes, not feeling able to share their struggles with a trusted parent or loved one can lead to serious consequences. The case of Justice Garrett, who was only 16 when her life was tragically cut short in 2018, has shocked Florida. For her mother, it was a heartbreaking realization. She had not recognized or understood the struggles her daughter was facing. Justice Marie Garrett was born on March 23, 2002, and is the eldest daughter of Danielle Pratt and Stanley Garrett. Justice spent most of her childhood and teenage years in New Smyrna Beach, a small town in Volusia County, Florida. In 2016, her parents divorced. Justice lived with their mother. A year later, Danielle started dating Robert Nixon Kern Jr. By the fall of 2017, Danielle moved with her daughters to Sorrento, Florida, a tiny rural town with a population of just over 1,000. They settled into Robert's house. Justice faced significant challenges after moving and struggled to adjust to her new surroundings. She missed her close friends who stayed in New Smyrna Beach, felt the difficulty of transferring schools in the middle of the academic year, and was unhappy with her new home and her mother's partner. Despite her frustrations, Justice remained respectful, tried not to cause any issues. Known for her friendly and humorous personality, she quickly made friends at her new school, especially forming a strong bond with a classmate. The two girls became nearly inseparable, with Justice often staying at her classmate's house, and they even referred to each other as sisters on social media. On Friday, April 13, 2018, Justice overslept and missed her school bus. In her rush to get ready for class, she skipped breakfast. That day, her younger sister, Devon, was ill and stayed home, while their mother was preparing to take Devon to the hospital. Justice chose to take a public bus to school, which was only a few stops away. She packed her backpack, said goodbye to her mother, and left the house. That was the last time anyone saw Justice alive. When Justice didn't return home from school at the expected time, her mother, Danielle, wasn't worried. She thought Justice had gone to her friend's house, which she often did after class. When Justice had missed school on Friday, and her phone had been off for almost 2 days, Danielle felt a surge of panic. After trying several times to reach her daughter without success, she hurried to the local police station to report her missing. The search for Justice began right away. When the officers found out that Justice had only moved to the area 6 months ago, they thought she might have gone back to her old town to visit friends for the weekend. Authorities believe that teenagers sometimes leave home suddenly, either in rebellion or for other reasons, and they thought Justice would likely return soon. However, Danielle firmly believed that her daughter wouldn't have left so far without telling her first. The initial step was to identify Justice's friends and find out if she had a boyfriend, any recent conflicts, or other relevant information that could clarify the circumstances of her disappearance. Justice left home without any money, and all of her personal items were still there. Her phone lost signal shortly after she departed for school. Her social media accounts showed no activity since late Thursday night, and she didn't reply to any calls or messages. None of her friends knew her whereabouts, as she hadn't been in touch with anyone. Justice was not drinking alcohol or using banned substance. She was not in a relationship and had never had serious romantic involvement. Justice surrounded herself with positive influences, had no conflicts with others, and had a clean legal record. Teachers at her school spoke highly of her. Her classmates viewed her as kind, compassionate, and sweet. The police quickly checked all local crime reports, incidents, and traffic accidents throughout the area. They considered the possibility that she might have been involved in an accident and was unable to communicate. However, there were no records of her being involved in any such events. Using data from her phone, investigators were able to track her movements on the morning she disappeared. Around 7:30 a.m., Justice left her home and began walking toward the school. Approximately 15 minutes later, her movements became unusual. She stopped for a moment and then abruptly changed direction. Shortly afterward, her phone was turned off. Justice's disappearance sparked rumors and speculation throughout the small, quiet town, where little ever happened. Any incident quickly became the center of attention, spreading through gossip and often embellished with falsehoods. On April 17th, for days after Justice went missing, a man alerted the police about a disturbing discovery he made in a wooded area outside of town. An experienced runner, he often jogged along a secluded trail that passed through a park and into the forest. That morning, while exploring the woods, he was struck by a strong, foul smell that seemed like decay. At first, he believed it was just the remains of a dead animal and thought about reporting it for removal. However, his curiosity led him to investigate the smell further. He stepped off the trail and walked approximately 15 feet into the underbrush, where he found a shocking sight: a severely decomposed human body, unrecognizable in appearance. Based on the long hair and pieces of clothing, it looked like a young woman. Her pants were pulled down to her ankles, her shirt and bra were pulled up around her neck, and her hoodie was tied tightly around her head. He quickly called the police and waited on the trail to avoid disturbing any potential evidence. When the officers arrived, they carefully examined the area and the remains. It was evident that this was a violent crime scene and the victim was a young woman. Her clothes were torn and her undergarments were missing, suggesting the crime was both abuse and aggressive. There were visible bite marks on her legs, probably from wild animals, but the most severe injuries were inflicted by a corrosive chemical. This substance had damaged her face down to the bone and had also been poured on her chest, lower abdomen, and private areas. It was clear that the perpetrator intended to disfigure the victim and remove any DNA evidence, which was unfortunately successful. From the beginning, investigators believed that the body discovered in the woods was that of Justice, who reported missing a few days earlier. However, due to significant chemical damage and decomposition, DNA testing was necessary for confirmation. Unfortunately, the Garrett family's fears were confirmed. Justice had been found dead. Her remains were located approximately 30 minutes away from her hometown. Evidence indicated that she had endured severe beating prior to her death, as her nose, cheekbone, and several ribs were fractured. Because of the advanced decomposition, the exact cause of death could not be clearly identified, but it was thought to be due to mechanical asphyxiation. The man who found the remains provided important information to the police during his interview. He shared that he often jogged along the same path every other day. 2 days before discovering the body, he had seen a suspicious man coming out of the woods near where Justice's remains were later located. Although the witness could not give a detailed description because he only saw the man briefly from behind and from a distance, he described him as a short, stocky white male dressed in jeans and a black hoodie. The man quickly left when he realized someone else was nearby and vanished behind the trees. At the time, the runner found the encounter strange but didn't think much of it. There was no noticeable smell of decay that day, so he pushed the incident from his mind. However, after he found the remains 2 days later, he remembered the unusual man on the trail and reported it to the authorities. Detectives quickly suspected that the unknown person in the woods could be the criminal behind the crime. They thought he might have returned to the scene to hide evidence. Experts identified the chemical used on the body as chlorine bleach. This, combined with the area's humid climate, sped up decomposition and made the remains unrecognizable. The jogger was eliminated as a suspect after passing a lie detector test and giving a strong alibi for the day Justice went missing. Justice's mother stated that her daughter intended to take a public bus to school that morning. However, security camera footage showed that Justice never arrived at the bus stop. A neighbor reported seeing Justice get into a car belonging to her stepfather, Robert. This information shifted the investigation's focus, prompting detectives to question Justice's parents again to understand why they hadn't been honest. Danielle, Justice's mother, quickly admitted that her partner, Robert, had recently lost his driver's license temporarily. Since Justice was running late that morning, he decided to give her a ride. Danielle had kept this information secret to avoid causing issues for Robert. At the time of the first interview, Justice's body has not been found yet. She thought Justice was still alive and would return home soon. Detectives quickly requested surveillance footage from cameras near the school to verify Robert's account. However, the recordings showed that Robert had neither dropped Justice off at school nor anywhere close by. His car was not seen on any cameras along the route to the school, raising questions about where they had gone. This indicated that Robert was likely the last person to see Justice alive. When questioned again, Robert confessed that he had driven Justice that morning despite having a suspended license. He explained that she had begged him not to take her to school but to the nearby town, where she allegedly had a meeting with a secret boyfriend. Robert claimed he did not know the name of this person and initially refused to take her, but eventually relented to her requests in an effort to improve their strained relationship. Justice had asked him not to tell her mother about this trip, assuring him she would return on her own later that day. She also said that since it was Friday, she planned to spend the night at a friend's house. Robert agreed, not seeing anything unusual or concerning about the situation. This new information brought a potential suspect into the investigation, a secret boyfriend. Investigators needed to find and identify him quickly, as he could either be connected to Justice's disappearance or, at the very least, might be the last person to have seen her alive. Law enforcement started their investigation by examining Justice's contacts and social media activity since her phone was still missing. They confiscated her laptop, which led to even more questions. Justice had several accounts on different social media platforms, where she regularly communicated with friends from both her real life and the online world, but no signs of romantic relationships or a boyfriend were found. One particular account, however, appeared strange and suspicious. Investigators concentrated on this profile to identify its owner and determine if it was linked to Justice's disappearance. A young man named Kevin had been increasingly interested in Justice Garrett over the past few months. He messaged her every day, liked her posts, and complimented her photos. However, Justice appeared uninterested. She seldom replied, often ignored his messages, and showed no intention of keeping in touch. Justice's friends later revealed that she had talked about a persistent admirer who frequently messaged her on social media, but she found him more bothersome than charming. Kevin's profile indicated that he was 2 years older than Justice and lived in the same town. The profile included only a few pictures of an athletic and attractive young man, but none of Justice's friends or family had ever met him in real life. Eventually, it was uncovered that the account was fake, with the photos taken from the internet. Experts promptly accessed the account and traced its creation. The investigation showed that the account didn't belong to a teenager but was linked to an adult man named Robert. Justice's stepfather was brought in for questioning. Detectives wanted to know why he had created a fake account to communicate with his stepdaughter and why he hadn't mentioned it before. Robert seemed taken aback that investigators had discovered his link to the account, but he quickly regained his composure and provided an explanation. He stated that he had created the account to help boost Justice's self-esteem, suggesting that as the new girl in town and at school, she might enjoy getting compliments from a seemingly attractive young man. Justice was new to the area, but she quickly fit into her school and made many friends. Recently, however, her close friends noticed changes in her behavior. The cheerful and carefree teenager became more tense and nervous. Although she didn't share the reasons for this change, she often stayed at her best friend's house. Justice spent so much time there that it felt like she had moved in, yet she never told her best friend what was bothering her. Her best friend observed that Justice's stepfather came by her house several times to pick Justice's up. Each time, Justice appeared anxious, tried to avoid going with him. She would call her mother, pleading to stay a few more nights at her friend's and promising to finish her chores, focus on schoolwork in return. Danielle typically agreed to her requests. Robert and Justice reportedly had a difficult relationship from the beginning, a fact known to her friends. However, Justice never claimed that he was aggressive or acted inappropriately, and no one around her, including her mother, had witnessed anything concerning in Robert's behavior towards his stepdaughter. As doubts about him grew, Robert became as the primary suspect in the investigation into Justice's tragic death. Police took him into custody for more questioning while also investigating his background and lifestyle. Robert, 43 years old, had a troubled past with the law, including convictions for burglary, banned substance possession, and violent incidents. His criminal record made it very difficult for him to find stable employment, so he sometimes worked illegally as a carpenter at a local sawmill, taking on odd jobs to get by. Detectives were now trying to piece together Robert's troubled history, his behavior towards Justice, and the events surrounding a horrific crime. Robert had hidden his past from everyone, including Danielle, who was unaware that she was living with someone who had a criminal background. When investigators uncovered the truth about him, Danielle was shocked and finally spoke out. She revealed that Robert had offered to drive Justice to school that day, even though Justice had expressed his reluctance. When Justice did not come home, Danielle became worried. However, Robert reassured her that Justice was staying overnight at her best friend's house. He even told her not to call the police or contact her friend. Investigators looked into Robert's devices and found that in the months before Justice disappeared, he had repeatedly searched online for information about substances that could make a person unconscious or immobile. He had also explored ways to buy such substances on the dark web and seemed to have successfully made a purchase. Robert didn't stop there. He looked into ways to remove DNA evidence from a body, using common household items like bleach and disinfectants. He even examined satellite images of wooded areas near DeLand, where Justice's body was ultimately discovered. It was apparent that Robert had been carefully planning his crime for months, intending to hide the body and eliminate all evidence. His motive was increasingly clear. He had developed an unhealthy obsession with justice and believed that the only way to fulfill his disturbing desires was through violence. To evade the legal repercussions for his actions, he resolved to kill her. Investigators cleared up their suspicions about Robert's involvement by examining the geolocation data from his phone on that day. He drove away from their home with Justice toward her school but then suddenly changed direction and stopped in a remote area. At this point, it's believed that Robert may have used a chemical, possibly chloroform, to incapacitate Justice. He then turned off Justice's phone. His vehicle was monitored as it traveled to the location where it remained for about an hour. This time frame would have provided him enough opportunity to assault Justice, physically harm her, strangle her, and hide her body in the woods. From 8:12 a.m. to 9:17 a.m., Robert's phone remained in the area where Justice's body was eventually found. On that day, He carried a small bottle of a chlorine-based substance, which he poured over her face and other areas to eliminate possible evidence. However, Robert became anxious, worrying that he might have left traces behind. 2 days later, he came back to the scene with a large container of bleach, poured it over Justice's head, chest, and lower body in a final effort to destroy any evidence that could connect him to the crime. That morning, the attacker revisited the crime scene and was seen by a jogger. The jogger later found Justice's body and reported it to the police. Kern's alibi quickly unraveled. Although he worked unofficially at a local sawmill, he had asked 2 co-workers to falsely claim he was on time that day, when in fact he was almost 2 hours late. When questioned further, both co-workers admitted the truth after being warned they could face charges for lying and hiding evidence in a violent crime. Robert denied all the charges, but the evidence against him was overwhelming, leading to a trial. Witnesses described Justice as living in fear during the final months of her life, often avoiding her home. Despite her struggles, she never expressed her fears, not even to her mother. Danielle, caught up in her love for her new partner, didn't recognize the danger and never asked Robert about his past. Prosecutors thoroughly disproved Robert's statements, showing he had carefully planned the crime with the intent to kill Justice. Forensic evidence, such as moss and soil samples from the location where Justice's body was found, matched particles found on his car mats, strengthening the connection to the crime scene. However, allegations of abuse assault could not be definitively proven because the DNA evidence and tissue samples had been destroyed by a corrosive chemical that he used, which eroded the victim's remains. In August 2022, almost 2.5 years after the crime, Robert Nixon Kern Jr. was found guilty of premeditated violent murder. He received a life sentence in prison without the possibility of parole, meaning he will never be released. The tragic murder of 16-year-old Justice Garrett on April 13, 2018, in Sorrento, Florida, exposed the hidden dangers of teenage vulnerability. Justice's silent struggles, unnoticed by her mother, Danielle, underscore the critical need for open communication and vigilance to protect teens from unseen threats, ensuring her loss inspires lasting change.
Zuzu Verk was born on April 22, 1995, in Keller, Texas. She grew up in a warm and loving family alongside her parents, Glenn Verk and Lori, and her older brother, Miles. Her brother described her as the brightest light in their lives. Zuzu attended Timber Creek High School and, after graduating, moved to Alpine, Texas, to study at the local university. She chose to major in conservation biology, driven by her passion for protecting the planet's wild spaces and creatures. Her academic achievements were impressive. She had recently made the Dean's List and was in the process of transferring to Texas University for her senior year. She was not only a dedicated student but also ambitious, idealistic, and focused on her goals. Her love for nature influenced her vision for the future. After college, she dreamed of living in Japan, where she could combine her passion for travel with her environmental advocacy. While in Alpine, she became involved with Robert Fabian, a young man 4 years her senior. At first, the relationship was based solely on attraction, but gradually became more complicated. Robert's charm attracted Zuzu, but her family, particularly her mother Lori and brother Miles, had some concerns about him. Lori viewed Robert as self-centered and dismissive, while Miles felt he was controlling and worried that he didn't support Zuzu's ambitions, particularly her desire to leave Alpine and pursue her dreams. Zuzu herself had similar worries. While she remained in the relationship, she confided in her mother that she couldn't envision a future with Robert. It felt more like a relationship of convenience than one based on genuine connection. Despite this, she remains kind and hopeful, reflecting her personality as she prepares to inform Robert about her transfer and her next choice. The last conversation Lori had with Zuzu was on October 10, 2016. Zuzu was excited to share that she was transferring to Texas University and ending her relationship with Robert. He had planned to take her to a movie the following night. Lori had no idea that this would be the last time she would ever hear her daughter's voice. As days went by without any word from Zuzu, worry turned into panic. Zuzu was known for always responding to messages, so her silence was unusual. Her parents, deeply concerned, started contacting everyone they knew who might have seen her. When Lori reached out to Robert, he said he hadn't seen Zuzu and mentioned that he was giving her some space. On October 14, 2016, Zuzu was officially reported missing. A massive search effort began, involving local authorities, state officials, and hundreds of volunteers. Helicopters flew over the desert, horseback riders searched difficult trails, and search teams extended their efforts hundreds of miles, even into Mexico. Flyers were distributed throughout the town, and a $100,000 reward was offered in hopes of finding Zuzu. However, hopes began to fade over time. The investigation began to focus on Robert Fabian. He told detectives that on the evening of October 11th, he and Zuzu had dinner at his apartment. He claimed that their dinner took a negative turn when he mentioned an ex-girlfriend, prompting Zuzu to leave in the early morning hours. He stated that he called her later but decided to stop trying to reach her when she didn't respond. This account raised suspicions with the police. A key witness was John Franco, a neighbor who resides downstairs from Robert. John reported seeing Zuzu enter Robert's apartment the night she disappeared. He could hear familiar sounds coming from Robert's apartment, such as chatter and laughter, but there was one strange moment. He heard Robert shout, "Shut up," breaking the usual atmosphere. Later, around 4 a.m., John saw Robert leaving the apartment alone, while Zuzu's car remained parked outside. John also recalled hearing what he thought were arguments and odd thuds from above, details that would later prove crucial. When investigators confronted Robert with this new information, his story changed. He now claimed that after the argument about the ex-girlfriend, he had left to drive to Dairy Queen to think things over. He said that when he returned, Zuzu was still there but left shortly after. This inconsistency raised enough suspicion for the detectives to request a search of Robert's apartment, to which he agreed. Inside, they found disturbing evidence. The bed was completely stripped of linens, and items like the mattress pad, clothes, and sheets had a strong smell of bleach. This painted a troubling picture. Investigators began to suspect that Zuzu's disappearance might be more complicated than they had initially thought. As the investigation expanded, a notable friend of Robert's, Chris Estrada, came to the group's attention. Their friendship dated back to high school, and this closeness made Chris a subject of scrutiny. Concerns grew after Chris appeared on national television on December 6, 2016, during an episode of Crime Watch Daily. Viewers and authorities noted his rigid posture, awkward mannerisms, and forced expressions. Phone records showed that Robert had called Chris at 3:15 a.m. on October 12, the same morning Zuzu went missing. During the investigation, Chris revealed that Robert had requested to borrow his credit card the day before, claiming to need it to buy plastic tarps for a painting project. This explanation raised suspicions. Why would anyone need painting supplies late at night? Investigators found the reasoning questionable and the timing suspicious. Another important witness, Brittany, told investigators that Chris had arrived at her apartment around midnight on October 13, appearing shaken. He looked pale and anxious, as if he had witnessed something disturbing. When she asked what was wrong, Chris allegedly replied, "Don't interfere." Despite these troubling signs, the case hit a dead end. All the evidence was circumstantial. There was no body and no concrete proof linking Robert to any crime. Zuzu's family, feeling devastated and desperate for answers, held press conferences urging Robert to come forward and help, but he remained silent. Weeks turned into months. However, on February 3, 2017, 3 months after Zuzu went missing, everything changed. While patrolling a remote area of Brewster County near Alpine, the police noticed something unusual: a disturbed patch of soil. As they approached, they saw plastic sticking out of the dirt, along with a blue sock and a piece of dark fabric. They immediately alerted the authorities. When investigators arrived and began to dig, their worst fears were realized. Inside a shallow grave, wrapped in a plastic painter's drop cloth, lay the body of Zuzu. DNA tests later confirmed her identity. Zuzu, a vibrant young woman with dreams of studying at Texas University, wanting to live in Japan, and who loved the stars and the earth, had finally been found. The plastic wrap used to conceal her body matched the type Robert had purchased at Dollar General using Chris's borrowed credit card. This was the crucial evidence. Within 24 hours of the discovery, Robert was arrested and charged with evidence tampering and abuse of a corpse. 2 days later, Chris was also arrested in Phoenix, Arizona, facing similar charges. The charges against Robert were soon upgraded to murder. In April 2018, Chris agreed to plead guilty and testify against his best friend, Robert, and he did not deny his role in the crime. In contrast, Robert maintained his innocence, pleading not guilty. His defense attorney argued that there was no direct physical evidence, no fingerprints or DNA linking Robert to the murder. However, prosecutors pointed to Robert's suspicious behavior after Zuzu's disappearance. He bleached sheets, changed his story multiple times, and showed an unusual interest in the investigation. A coworker even testified that Robert, who was once calm, became erratic after Zuzu went missing, frequently inquiring about law enforcement activities. This behavior indicated not a concerned boyfriend, but someone anxious about their own involvement in a crime. The trial was painful for Zuzu's family but also brought some closure as the grim truth emerged. Zuzu's memory would endure, cherished by her family as a vibrant young woman with dreams and aspirations that were tragically cut short. On the third day of the trial, silence fell over the courtroom as Chris took the witness stand and made a confession that would alter the case's direction. He described a night marked by desperation, phone calls, and a secret that was never meant to be shared. Chris testified that Robert called him late at night, insisting it was a life-or-death situation. During their conversation, Robert recounted a distressing evening with Zuzu that turned violent. According to Chris, an argument led to Robert strangling Zuzu. As she gasped for air and eventually stopped breathing, Robert panicked. Chris claimed that Robert attempted to perform CPR, but it was too late. Following this incident, Chris testified that Robert entered survival mode, attempting to conceal his actions. Claims that Zuzu's death was an accident seem disingenuous. Strangulation is a deliberate and conscious act, not a knee-jerk reaction. Chris confessed that Robert repeatedly called him, pleading for help in disposing of Zuzu's body. At one point, Robert even showed up at Chris's home in Alpine, begging for help and urging him not to go to the police. Although Chris claimed he refused to assist Robert, he admitted that he did not report what he knew, a decision that would haunt the investigation. While he was not physically involved in Zuzu's death, his silence prolonged the suffering of her family and hindered the pursuit of justice. Whether motivated by fear, loyalty, or moral indecision, Chris chose silence over honesty, leaving Zuzu's family in the dark for an extended period. In an unexpected turn of events, a new witness took the stand in the courtroom. Roy Roman, who once shared a cell with Robert at Brewster County Jail, testified that Robert had privately admitted to killing Zuzu. He claimed Robert was motivated by Zuzu's discovery of secrets he wanted to keep hidden. Specifically, she had learned about a potential romantic involvement between him and Chris, and she threatened to expose it. Fearing this revelation, Roy stated that Robert decided to silence Zuzu permanently. Roy described Robert as distraught in his cell, repeatedly saying that he hadn't meant to do that. On May 8, 2019, after 5 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered its verdict. Robert Fabian was found guilty on all counts and received a life sentence in prison, along with an additional 29 years for tampering with evidence. Chris Estrada, who had earlier accepted a plea deal and testified against Robert, was sentenced to 42 months in prison and fined for tampering with evidence and evading law enforcement. While Zuzu's family felt a sense of justice from the verdict, it did not bring them peace. Their beloved daughter was gone forever, and nothing could change that. In the midst of their grief, they received a painful reminder of what could have been, a letter from Texas University confirming Zuzu's acceptance into a program she had worked tirelessly to join. It was her dream, but tragically, she would never live to experience it. To honor Zuzu, the university renamed its amphitheater to Zuzu's Place and established a scholarship in natural resource management in her name, celebrating her dedication to protecting the natural world. However, the emotional scars from Zuzu's murder remain profound. Her brother, Miles, thought of her often and cherished small memories, like her washing dishes or her goodnight wishes, which now served as sweet but wistful reminders of the times they had together. Zuzu's family, although heartbroken, remains strong and is incredibly grateful for the ongoing support from the Alpine community. They acknowledged that without this support, they might not have survived the darkest times of their lives. Zuzu was a visionary, full of dreams of a life rich with purpose, travel, and making a difference. Her story serves as a heartbreaking warning: never remain in relationships that stifle your growth. Never let anyone prevent you from becoming your true self. Zuzu was close to achieving the freedom and life she dreamed of, but in the end she didn't succeed. Her story also reminds us to protect our dreams, stay independent, and never let anyone make us choose between love and freedom. On a hot, humid night in Louisiana, the silence was shattered by screams. A young man, naked and tied up, ran through the streets, desperately calling for help. Pursuing him was an unexpected figure, a man whom neighbors considered quiet and polite. Some residents peeked outside but chose to remain indoors, assuming it was merely a disagreement. He vanished into the darkness, while his pursuer returned to his trailer. At that moment, no one understood the gravity of the situation or realized it was the start of a much darker story. A hidden monster lived among them, and it would take years for the truth to emerge. Ronald Joseph Dominique was born on January 9, 1964, in Thibodaux, Louisiana, a small town located in the swampy southern part of the state. He was one of 6 children in a large family. The atmosphere in the Dominique home was tough, poverty loomed over them and emotional support was lacking. The family's financial struggles, the challenges of raising so many children created a daily life filled with tension and neglect. From a young age, Ronald was different from his peers, not in ways that earned him approval. He displayed traits that were seen as feminine, such as a gentle walk and a preference for spending time with girls instead of boys. In a community that valued traditional gender roles, these characteristics made Ronald a target for mockery and exclusion, particularly from his father. Their relationship was strained. His father's disappointment in Ronald's lack of interest in typical masculine activities only widened the emotional gap between them. Although Ronald's relationship with his mother was not as hostile, she was overwhelmed by the demands of raising 7 children and struggled to give Ronald the love, attention he needed. This sense of alienation marked Ronald's childhood both at home and in the wider community. His brothers participated in the bullying, often using homophobic slurs, which reinforced his isolation. One troubling detail is that Ronald was made to live in a small trailer on the family's property, separating him from the main house and symbolizing his exclusion. School didn't provide any relief for Ronald. He faced constant bullying from classmates, suffering insults, public humiliation, and physical intimidation. Despite his gentle and reserved demeanor, he became a regular target. A particularly painful memory from high school occurred during a homecoming dance when he attended with a close female friend. Throughout the evening, he spent a lot of time dancing with another boy, which attracted attention. This incident led to an increase in both verbal and physical harassment that he was already experiencing. One of the most painful experiences of Ronald's early life was the abuse he endured from a priest. This abuse occurred on at least 2 occasions and left deep emotional scars. When Ronald bravely told his parents about it, hoping for their support, they did not believe him. Their disbelief not only left him vulnerable to more abuse but also broke the trust he had in his family. Amidst this chaos, Ronald begins to understand his true gender. He realized he was gay from a young age, but the hostile and homophobic atmosphere he lived in forced him to hide his true self. He feared rejection and violence, which weighed heavily on him emotionally. After graduating high school, Ronald sought a way to escape. He moved closer to New Orleans, a city known for its rich culture and more accepting LGBTQ community. For him, this move represented a desperate quest for freedom and a fresh start, away from the harsh judgments of Thibodaux. In his early adulthood, he bought a small trailer, which became his home. Although modest, it symbolized his first experience of independence, a personal space free from his family's oppressive influence. However, the trailer also highlighted the financial struggles that followed him into adulthood. He has a low-paying job, often relied on public assistance just to cover basic expenses. This economic hardship affected his self-esteem and made him feel increasingly vulnerable socially. In New Orleans, Ronald began to explore his true gender more openly. The city's lively nightlife, filled with gay bars, clubs, and vibrant LGBTQ events, offered him a liberating experience unlike the oppressive atmosphere of his upbringing. For the first time, he felt capable of living freely without the constant fear of rejection. However, adjusting to this new environment proved to be challenging. Ronald was often perceived as socially awkward and, by typical standards, not very physically attractive. These characteristics made it hard for him to build meaningful connections, even within the more accepting LGBTQ community. His feelings of insecurity and social discomfort only intensified his loneliness. In his quest for acceptance, Ronald turned to the local drag scene, an energetic subculture within New Orleans' LGBTQ community. Influenced by his love of music and his admiration for singer Patti LaBelle, he chose Patti as his stage name. However, his attempts at performing were disappointing, lacking the charm and confidence needed to captivate an audience. Ronald's awkward performances resulted in mockery, rejection. What started as a hopeful journey towards self-expression ended up being another humiliating experience, further damaging his already delicate self-esteem. Ronald faced significant challenges in forming lasting romantic and platonic relationships. His appearance, financial difficulties, and introverted nature hindered his ability to connect with others. As he faced a series of rejections, he began to doubt his self-worth. The loneliness he felt grew into feelings of resentment and darker thoughts. His financial situation remained dire. Without a college education or specialized skills, Ronald was stuck in low-paying jobs that barely covered his living expenses. This frugal and stagnant way of life only deepened his sense of hopelessness and social isolation, which steadily took a toll on his mental well-being. Emotionally, Ronald was in a constant struggle. He desired acceptance and love but frequently encountered rejection, loneliness. Over time, the combination of social failures, poverty, and profound isolation created a volatile emotional state. Ronald's first recorded legal issue occurred in 1985 when he was arrested for making explicit harassing phone calls to several individuals in his area. The authorities traced the calls back to him. Although it was a serious matter, it was considered a minor offense at the time, and Ronald avoided jail by paying a $74 fine. Few could have anticipated that this incident would mark the beginning of a troubling pattern of behavior that would lead to more severe crimes. By August 1996, Ronald's criminal behavior escalated significantly. His second arrest marked a pivotal point in his downward spiral. That night, while driving, Ronald spotted a young man walking alone. Ronald approached him, pretending to be friendly, and offered a ride, luring him in with the promise of marijuana. Once they reached Ronald's trailer, everything changed dramatically. In a shocking act of violence, Ronald attacked the young man, tying him up with an extension cord to limit his movement. Ronald then abused him, ignoring the victim's desperate attempts to fight back. During the assault, Ronald showed a violent and aggressive side that was hidden from the public, in stark contrast to his usual polite demeanor. However, in a moment of luck, the victim managed to partially free himself. Despite being naked and still tied up, he made a bold escape by jumping through a trailer window and running into the night. His screams for help echoed through the darkness, drawing the attention of nearby residents. The scene was chaotic. A disheveled man, partially tied up, was running through the streets with Ronald chasing him, trying to stop him from escaping. Neighbors came out of their homes to see what was happening, but most decided not to get involved, thinking it was just a domestic argument or a misunderstanding. Ronald was known as a quiet, respectful neighbor, which made people less suspicious of him. In the end, the young man found someone who could help and reported the incident to the police, providing them with a detailed account of the abduction and assault, naming Ronald as his attacker. Ronald was arrested within days on charges of aggravated abuse and kidnapping. His bail was set at $100,000, which he could not pay, so he stayed in jail while waiting for his trial. The 2 to 3 months he spent in jail were traumatic, leaving him vulnerable and anxious, him a target for severe abuse from other inmates. The attacks were so brutal that he needed hospitalization and surgery. This experience caused him deep psychological scars and a crippling fear of returning to prison. While incarcerated, Ronald became increasingly withdrawn, trying to avoid conflict and keep a low profile to protect himself. When his court date finally came, the prosecution suffered a significant setback. The victim did not show up in court. Without the victim's testimony, the prosecutors had to drop the charges due to lack of evidence. Although it was clear that Ronald had committed a violent crime, the justice system could not proceed without the victim's presence. In 1997, Ronald's violent behavior increased significantly. His first known murder victim was 19-year-old David Mitchell, who went missing on July 13, 1997, after attending a birthday party at his grandmother's house. David, who often hitchhiked, accepted a ride from Ronald that night, a decision that led to his death. He was never seen alive again. The following day, July 14, David's body was found in a remote drainage ditch. The intense heat and humidity of Louisiana had sped up decomposition, making the forensic investigation more difficult. However, examiners concluded that he had drowned. The lack of defensive wounds and the unusual circumstances surrounding his death indicated that there might be more to the case. 5 months later, on December 14, 1997, tragedy struck again when the body of 20-year-old Gary Pierre was discovered. The cause of death was evident: Gary had been strangled. Similarly to David, he had no defensive injuries, suggesting he was either caught off guard or overpowered. The disturbing similarities between both cases raised alarms among law enforcement. Although there was no solid evidence linking the two incidents, concerns grew that a serial killer might be involved. In the following months, Ronald continued his deadly actions, targeting mostly young men who vanished from the streets of New Orleans and nearby areas. Ronald's victims were typically teenagers and men between the ages of 16 and 46. The community grew increasingly fearful of this hidden predator. Despite rising concerns, police struggled to connect the clues. Without solid evidence, Ronald evaded detection, allowing his violent rampage to persist unnoticed. Although witnesses reported seeing some of the victims in bars and areas known for intimate services, authorities have had difficulty establishing a clear connection between these sightings and a potential suspect. The murders kept occurring. The deaths were of Oliver LeBanks, 27, of Metairie, Joseph Brown, 16, of Kenner, and Bruce Williams, 18. In June 1999, another victim, 21-year-old Angel Mejia. The killer initially tried to throw Mejia's body in a trash can, but after discovering that the bin was full, he dumped Mejia's on the street. After an autopsy, police investigators determined that the victim had been tied up with rope before he died. Like the previous victims, Mejia had been abusively assaulted and strangled. His body showed no signs of struggle, highlighting the calculated nature of the killer. With each new victim, police became more convinced they were up against a highly organized serial killer. Yet, despite the growing apprehension and rising number of victims, the investigation made little significant progress. The community remained in a state of fear while authorities faced an unending cycle of similar crimes without any solid leads. Ronald, who had previously shown caution, started to revert to his old, dangerous ways. After changing jobs and moving homes, he left his job and moved in with his sister. Although it seemed like he was establishing a more stable life by working as a laborer, he still posed a significant threat to the community. In late 2002, Dominique and his sister moved to the unincorporated rural community of Bayou Blue. There, he found work as a power level tester at a local power supply, allowing him to travel periodically. Around this time, Dominique killed 19-year-old Datrell Woods, dumping both him and his bicycle in a reed field. Woods' partially nude and decomposed body was not discovered until May 24, 2003. The cause of death was ruled as asphyxiation, the death being ruled an accident, as the victim was known to have asthma. His next victims were Larry Matthews, 46, his first white victim, Michael Barnett, 21, and Leon Lirette, 22, who had previously lived with two other victims, Barnett and Anoka Jones. In April, Dominique met August Watkins, 31, whom he lured to his truck. After Watkins was locked in his trailer, Dominique tied him up, abused him, and strangled him. After Watkins' body was discovered, the police finally began to consider for the first time that a serial killer was operating in Kenner and Houma, as the murders in both areas showed a very similar modus operandi. The case was turned over to the FBI. A few days after killing Watkins, Dominique killed Kurt Cunningham, 23. Later that summer, he killed Alonzo Hogan, 28, in St. Charles Parish, and Wayne Smith, 17, in Terrebonne Parish. Hogan was ed by Dominique before the autopsy, while no traces of semen were found on Smith's body because his body had been dumped in a canal, where it was badly decomposed when it was discovered just days later. In September 2005, Dominique killed 40-year-old Chris DeVille, who was trying to hitchhike out of Napoleonville after Hurricane Katrina. He then dumped DeVille's body in a reed field. His remains were discovered the following month and identified by relatives, using only identification cards and other personal items left next to his body. In late November, Dominique killed 21-year-old Nicholas Pellegrin in Lafourche Parish. During the investigation into his death, Pellegrin's relatives told police that shortly before his death, the deceased man had borrowed $400 from local banned substance dealers and had fallen behind on payments, after which he began receiving death threats. As a result, before Dominique was arrested, Pellegrin's death was falsely ruled banned substance-related. Dominique's last confirmed victim was 27-year-old Christopher Setterfield. He met Dominique in the summer of 2006, after which the two began dating. On October 14th, while on a date together in Iberville Parish, Dominique struck Setterfield in the head with a heavy object, rendering him unconscious. After his body was found, police interviewed Setterfield's relatives, friends, and acquaintances, all of whom confirmed that they had last seen him with a man driving a black SUV, but they were unable to describe the appearance of his companion. In November 2006, Dominique came to the attention of police after Ricky Wallace, a resident of Bayou Blue, reported that Dominique had lured him to his trailer in mid-2006 with the offer of sharing banned substance and intimate with a girl. After Wallace entered the trailer, according to his testimony, Dominique attempted to convince him that his girlfriend liked being tied up, offering to tie Wallace up. Ricky refused, and he was allowed to leave shortly thereafter. Ricky provided crucial information that helped investigators link Ronald Dominique to a series of unsolved murders. Further investigation showed that Ronald's movements coincided with the locations where multiple bodies had been discovered. As surveillance operations and background checks intensified, investigators obtained a DNA sample from Dominique. Tests connected his DNA to evidence found on one of the victims, Oliver Lobanks. Although the initial match was based on mitochondrial DNA, less conclusive than nuclear DNA, it was sufficient to justify close monitoring of him. The brutality of this crime prompted authorities to take immediate action. On December 1, 2006, Ronald Joseph Dominique was arrested. Despite his frail appearance and need for a cane, police were confident they had apprehended the man responsible for at least 23 murders. In the beginning, Dominique denied any involvement during questioning. However, as the interrogation progressed, he ultimately confessed to killing all of his known victims. He tried to portray the murders as self-defense, arguing that his victims had attacked him first. Nonetheless, he later admitted to binding and strangling each victim. Dominique described his technique. He would entice young men with promises of money or by showing a fake photo of an attractive woman, claiming he was looking for someone to engage in intimate activities with her. Once he lured them into his trailer and restrained them, they were completely under his control. In some instances, he used blunt objects like iron rods to strike his victims before strangling them. After his confession, Dominique was presented with a deal. If he fully cooperated by disclosing the locations of the victims' bodies and providing more information about the murders, prosecutors would refrain from pursuing the death penalty. Dominique agreed to this deal. He guided investigators to several sites where the bodies had been discarded, enabling authorities to gather sufficient evidence to convict him. Out of the 23 murders linked to Ronald Dominique, police were able to conclusively prove 8. After accepting a plea agreement from prosecutors, on September 24, 2008, the court found Dominique guilty on all charges and sentenced him to 8 consecutive life terms without parole. Dominique avoided the death penalty by pleading guilty to all charges and was incarcerated at the Louisiana State Prison in Angola. Some families of his victims were upset with the plea deal, wishing he had received the death penalty. However, others found some comfort knowing that Dominique would spend the rest of his life in the very environment he feared, the general prison population, where his vulnerability and past crimes made him a target. As of now, Dominique is still incarcerated, serving multiple life sentences.
On December 5, 1975, in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, a married couple was on their way home from a school basketball game. At around 8:30 p.m., the wife decided to visit her niece, Lindy, who lived nearby. They parked their car near the apartment complex, and she got out to quickly check on her niece, leaving her husband in the car. However, when she reached the apartment, she discovered that the front door was unlocked. Cautiously peering inside, she saw a knocked-over floor lamp and other items scattered around. The disarray of the apartment indicated that a fight had occurred. When she noticed strange stains on the floor resembling blood, she stepped into the living room. What she discovered would haunt her forever. In the center of the room lay Lindy, with a knife stabbed into her throat. Overwhelmed with panic, she ran out of the house and hurried to her car to call the police. The police arrived at the scene and were baffled about who could have had a conflict with the young 19-year-old girl, who had recently gotten married. They wondered what could have led to her brutal murder. Lindy Sue Beekler was born on January 31, 1956. Her parents divorced when she was very young. She was raised by her mother. Her father moved to the suburbs, remarried, and had a son with his new wife, making him Lindy's half-brother. From a young age, Lindy was curious and cheerful. She loved exploring new activities. Lindy participated in the Girl Scouts, went hiking, enjoyed boating, and joined different clubs. Lindy was a positive person who made everyone feel good. Her bright smile encouraged others to smile too. Above all, she treasured her family. One of her favorite things to do was curl up on the couch with her mother. In those moments, she felt like the happiest person alive because her mother was not only a caring parent, but also her best friend. Recently, Lindy had been employed at a flower shop, where her boss and co-workers described her as very hardworking, humble, and somewhat shy. However, once they got to know her better, Lindy revealed her fun side. She had a great sense of humor. Despite this, she preferred not to be the center of attention. Lindy married at a young age despite her insecurities. Her husband, Philip Beekler, was 5 years older than her. They first met when Lindy was visiting her sister. They were instantly attracted to each other. On October 19th, the year before the attack, Lindy and Philip tied the knot. The ceremony was officiated by Philip's grandfather, who blessed their union, saying they were perfect for one another. Philip worked part-time as an agent at a car rental company while studying art at Millersville State College. It appeared he was inspired by his parents. His mother owned an art gallery and was deeply passionate about art. Lindy is just 2 months away from turning 20 and has recently begun to embrace adult life as a married woman. Philip and Lindy were happily living together in their small one-bedroom apartment. However, Lindy felt uneasy being home alone. She never felt safe since they moved in. She constantly sensed that someone was watching her through the sliding glass door. Though she couldn't pinpoint anyone specific, overall, she was simply afraid to be alone in the apartment. In January, they planned to move to a new place in Manor Township. In the evenings, Lindy got home from work a couple of hours before her husband. She would lock the doors and turn on all the lights, carefully listening to every noise. During the investigation of the crime scene, the police found that Lindy had been stabbed 19 times. The attack involved 2 different knives. One knife, which the attacker had brought, was never found, while the other knife came from Lindy's kitchen. This kitchen knife was still in her neck when her aunt discovered her. Lindy's body showed 11 stab wounds to her chest and upper abdomen, 5 to her back, and 3 to her neck. One of the stabs had pierced the carotid artery, causing her to bleed to death. Experts noted that Lindy had defensive wounds on her hands, suggesting she fought fiercely for her life until the very end. The apartment was in chaos, with blood everywhere. It appeared that, after finishing her shift at the flower shop, Lindy had stopped to buy groceries, as bags of food were left on the kitchen table, still unpacked. This indicates that the attack occurred right after she returned home. Several pieces of evidence were collected at the crime scene. A shoe print, likely size 10 or 11, was discovered on the kitchen floor. This print suggested that the attacker was likely a large, strong man. Another piece of evidence hinted at a possible motive, although Lindy was fully clothed when found. Detectives suspected she had been abused. Male fluid was discovered on her underwear, which could provide the perpetrator's DNA. However, in 1975, forensic capabilities were limited. Experts could only identify the attacker's blood type and compare it with that of a suspect, but they needed to identify a suspect first. Unfortunately, that was where the evidence trail ended. The police also lacked the perpetrator's fingerprints, as the knife handle found in Lindy's throat was wrapped in a kitchen towel. The news of Lindy's tragic death devastated her family. Relatives called Philip at work, telling him he needed to come home immediately because something had happened to Lindy. As he rushed to their apartment, he feared the worst, but he could never have imagined that his beloved wife had been brutally killed. The police did not allow Philip inside the apartment, leaving him confused about what had happened. They kept him in the hallway until he found out the heartbreaking news that Lindy was dead. Seeing how pale he became, medics gave him a sedative, and the police took him to his mother's house. For about 4 days, Philip felt lost. He couldn't tell whether it was day or night or how much time had passed since the tragedy. He had to sit and wait for answers while the police continued their investigation. Detectives interviewed her co-workers and employer, and none of them noticed anything unusual about her behavior. Lindy went to work at the flower shop in a good mood. That day, she did not appear anxious or scared. There were no dissatisfied customers. Everything was completely normal. Lindy excitedly shared with her colleagues about the Christmas gift she had prepared for her husband. That evening, she calmly got into her car, waved goodbye to her colleagues, and drove home. Unbeknownst to anyone, it would be her last evening alive. Around 5:30 p.m. After work, Lindy went to the car dealership where her husband, Philip, worked to pick up his paycheck. She cashed the check at the bank and then went to a nearby grocery store to buy groceries, filling 4 bags. Afterward, she headed home, parked her car, and began unloading the bags. It seemed likely she would need to make 2 trips. At that moment, someone likely entered her apartment and attacked her. Detectives speculated on this since there were no signs of forced entry, and Lindy was not the kind of person to let a stranger into her home. This led the police to believe that Lindy knew her attacker, felt safe being alone with them. The first person the detectives looked at as a suspect was the victim's husband, Philip. However, the family and friends insisting that Philip and Lindy were a happy couple. Philip deeply loved Lindy and felt incredibly lucky to be dating her. Amazed that someone so beautiful would be interested in him, he said she changed his life for the better by inspiring him to enroll in college and pursue painting. In return, he supported her dream of opening a flower shop. When Lindy was killed, it devastated Philip. He couldn't bear to stay in their apartment, where every corner reminded him of her, so he moved out. Although he had a strong alibi, investigators were slow to clear him as a suspect. Following Lindy's death, Philip felt lost. He wandered the streets for hours, dropped out of college. They had dreamt of finishing their studies, starting a family, and planning their future together. Now, in an instant, all their dreams collapsed, like a sandcastle washed away by the tide. Philip had to completely rebuild his life in light of this tragic reality. The second suspect in the investigation was Bob, Lindy's direct supervisor. His favorable comments and positive evaluations of Lindy took an unexpected turn. The day before her tragic death, Lindy baked him blueberry muffins for his birthday. Bob spoke so highly of her that police began to question whether he had developed an inappropriate attachment. At 35 years old, single, and without an alibi, Bob caught the attention of the authorities, prompting them to scrutinize him more closely. The pressure became overwhelming, leading him to hire a lawyer to safeguard his privacy. Bob passed a lie detector test and fully cooperated with the police. After clearing both Lindy's husband and Bob as suspects, The police interviewed hundreds of people, including friends, family, and acquaintances, yet they found no one who might have wanted to harm her. Neighbors were also questioned, but no one reported seeing anything unusual that day. The atmosphere in the apartment complex grew tense as residents began purchasing weapons for protection. While violence in other neighborhoods was concerning, the murder of a young woman next door felt particularly alarming. A note from the police was taped to the Beechlers' front door, indicating that it was a crime scene and restricting access for local residents. This served as a constant reminder of the tragedy and the unsettling reality that the killer might still be nearby. The investigation hit a dead end. The only clue from neighbors was a report of an unfamiliar dark-colored car parked outside Lindy's house at the time of her death, with its headlights on. Even if the driver was not involved in the crime, they could have been a witness. However, locating the car proved to be impossible. Neighbors' descriptions varied widely, and no one could recall the license plate number. Meanwhile, the police station was overwhelmed with calls. Although some leads seemed promising, none led to concrete answers, forcing investigators to develop their own theories. One theory suggested that Lindy was being stalked by someone who observed her and her husband's routines, waiting for the right moment to attack. It's possible the intruder entered the apartment while Lindy was unloading groceries, or that it was a burglar who planned to steal valuables, but panicked and assaulted her with a knife when she unexpectedly returned. However, the burglary theory was weak because Lindy's purse, containing her jewelry, was still in the apartment. Additionally, the nature of the abuse assault did not align with typical burglar behavior. The police eventually identified an 18-year-old suspect, who was arrested. He was known for committing terrible acts. He had already attacked 4 women, binding them with their own clothing and stabbing them with a screwdriver. In one instance, when a victim attempted to flee, he chased her in his car and tried to run her over. The location and timing of his crimes made the police suspect his involvement in Lindy's attack. However, investigations revealed he was not connected to that incident, as he was at work that day, supported by multiple colleagues. In December 1976, Lindy's family visited her grave to pay their respects. What they found left them in shock. Someone had vandalized the grave. The headstone was covered in knife marks. Pieces of it were scattered nearby, and the rest was splattered with red spray paint. The police took this incident seriously, as they believed the vandal might have also been involved in Lindy's death. The use of a knife suggested the vandal was aware of how Lindy had died, and notably, only her grave had been targeted in the entire cemetery. Since the family had kept the burial location private, it indicated that the vandal had intentionally sought it out, possibly by following family members. Unfortunately, the detectives were unable to identify the culprit. An entire year went by without any answers, leaving Lindy's family in a state of confusion and distress about what happened to her. In the following years, detectives looked into many people who were connected to Lindy's life. They examined her mother's boyfriend, looked into frequent customers of the flower shop, and even explored possible connections to serial killers active in Pennsylvania at that time. In their search for answers, they even consulted psychics. Despite these efforts, the case of Lindy Beechler's death remained unsolved. 25 years after Lindy's tragic death, the lead detective retired, leaving the Lindy case as one of the oldest unsolved cases in Lancaster County. In 2006, the investigation into Lindy's death was transferred to a special group in Pennsylvania that focused on old unsolved cases, utilizing new techniques and perspectives. However, they too were unable to make any progress. Decades after his wife's death, Philip Beechler discovered the DNA analysis techniques used to convict the perpetrator. He believed these methods could also be applied to his wife Lindy's case. In 2019, police applied these techniques to analyze DNA from the crime scene and created a composite sketch of a potential suspect based on the DNA. A computer program produced 2 portraits. One depicted how the suspect likely appeared at the time of Lindy's attack, and the other showed what the suspect might look like at age 65. While the portraits weren't exact representations, they revealed important details about the suspect, including fair skin, brown eyes, dark hair, and possible distinctive features. Despite this progress, locating the suspect was still difficult. The DNA sample was analyzed by C.C. Moore, a well-known American genetic genealogist. She discovered that the DNA found on the victim's underwear in 1975 was connected to a small town in Italy. Moore invested a lot of time identifying individuals with Italian ancestry who were living in Lancaster County at the time of Lindy's murder. She traced the migration patterns from this small Italian town to Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. After ruling out over 2,000 individuals with similar genetic profiles, she was able to use public records to narrow it down to one suspect. This led her to identify the likely killer, a man named David Sinopoli. Investigators checked the name against existing databases, but found no records. This man had never been noticed by the police before, and his name was not on any suspect lists. However, while reviewing the case files, detectives learned that David lived in the same apartment complex as the Beechlers. To establish his connection to Lindy's death, they needed to obtain David's DNA. On February 11, 2022, David was at Philadelphia International Airport waiting for his flight. To pass the time, he bought coffee, not realizing that police were observing him from afar. After David finished his coffee, he threw the empty cup into a trash bin. An officer then discreetly collected the discarded cup and placed it in a plastic bag for further examination. The cup was sent to a lab for DNA analysis, which revealed a match between the DNA on the cup and the seminal fluid found on Lindy Beechler's underwear, confirming that David Sinopoli had been at the crime scene. Additionally, 2 drops of blood found on her stockings matched his DNA, providing further evidence. Initially, investigators thought the significant amount of blood at the crime scene belonged to the victim. However, they also considered the possibility that the perpetrator had injured himself and left behind traces of his blood. On July 17, 2022, around 7 a.m., police arrived at David's home, a few miles from the site where Lindy was murdered years earlier. He did not resist arrest, but his wife, who had been married to him for 36 years, was completely shocked. They had 3 children and 9 grandchildren, all of whom were unaware that they had been living with a criminal and murderer. Following the tragic murder of 19-year-old Lindy, David had lived quietly for nearly 47 years, never revealing his past and believing he would escape punishment. After David was arrested, Lindy's family had a reason to celebrate. Unfortunately, many family members never got to see justice served. Lindy's father died in 2000, and her mother followed in 2007. Her husband, Philip, was still alive and had remarried around 1990. Even though he hadn't initially planned to, he wanted to honor Lindy's hopes for him by finishing college, attending graduate school, and becoming an artist, which he accomplished. Eventually, he was able to let go of the tragedy and move forward with his life. The day after David's arrest, the police held a press conference announcing that they considered the case of Lindy Beechler's murder closed. Friends and family of David struggled to believe he was involved, thinking there must have been a misunderstanding. However, it's painful to acknowledge that this man evaded consequences for his actions for nearly 50 years, living as if nothing had happened after taking a young woman's future. Years went by, but the police never forgot about the case and continuously worked to solve it. Eventually, justice was served. David Sinopoli was taken into custody without the option for bail. Initially, he strongly denied any connection to Beechler's death, but as the trial date approached, he changed his mind and agreed to a plea deal. On October 19, 2023, 48 years after the crime, David Sinopoli pleaded guilty to third-degree murder, aggravated assault, and burglary. He received a prison sentence of 25 to 50 years. The judge mentioned that considering the defendant's age, this effectively amounted to a life sentence. David never explained why he killed Lindy by brutally stabbing her 19 times and violating her body to fulfill his selfish desires. Lindy and David were neighbors in the same apartment complex, but there is no evidence that they ever interacted prior to the crime. This leaves the true motives behind his actions a mystery, even to the police. It's possible that David was strongly attracted to her and eventually succumbed to his hidden urges. His primal instincts took over, which is why he is now in prison. She was only 9 years old, and what the police discovered in that bathroom was unforgettable. It all started when a taxi driver in Lima overheard an alarming conversation. This led the police to a small apartment in San Miguel. Although everything appeared calm inside, A closed door concealed a shocking discovery. Neighbors reported not hearing anything unusual. No screams or cries, but something terrible had occurred, and someone was concealing the truth. This is the heartbreaking story of Pierina Nicole, a little girl who did not receive the protection she deserved. Pierina Nicole was born in 2002 in Piura, a city in northwestern Peru. Her early life was significantly influenced by her mother's difficult past. Isabel Mirella Tello Chanduvi. Isabel faced a troubled childhood, having been abused by a doctor when she was just 13 years old. This traumatic event sparked a lifelong rebellion and resentment in Isabel, especially towards her parents. As an adult, Isabel had 5 children with 4 different fathers, and one of them was Pierina. Due to the instability in Isabel's life, she gave Pierina to a family friend just 1 week after the baby was born, saying she couldn't take care of her. In this new home, Pierina was lovingly embraced. Without any other small children around, she quickly became the center of the family, bringing joy and warmth to the household. Isabel continued to support Pierina financially and visited often. Alfredo Cardosa Curay, Pierina's father, remained an important figure in her life, even after he separated from Isabel and began a new family. His relationship with Pierina stayed strong. He visited her regularly and prioritized her well-being. During her early years, Pierina flourished under the care of the woman who welcomed her into her home. She received lots of love and lived in a calm environment. Pierina, known for her gentle personality and kind nature, quickly endeared herself to her neighbors. When Pierina turned 3, Isabel decided to move to Lima. From then on, she only visited her daughter once a month. As a result, the bond between mother and daughter grew weaker. During this time, Pierina's maternal grandmother, Bertha Chanduvi Garcia, became more involved in her life. However, Bertha was viewed unfavorably by some neighbors, who labeled her as an alcoholic living a troubled life. These opinions reached Pierina's caregiver. She acknowledged that even though Bertha lived nearby, they never became close. Ultimately, the responsibility for taking care of Pierina shifted more directly to her biological mother and grandmother. At first, it might have looked like a long-awaited family reunion, with a child reconnecting with her blood relative. However, the situation was much more painful. Isabel was known for her unpredictable behavior and didn't have the patience required for raising children. Her mood swings made her parenting unreliable. While she occasionally met her responsibilities, she frequently neglected them, both in daily care and in making sure her daughter went to school. At first, the abuse Pierina experienced was verbal, consisting of insults and harsh criticism. Being very young, she didn't fully understand how damaging her home life had become. Despite the hostile atmosphere, she remained kind, obedient, and loving. Alfredo tried to stay involved, but his interactions with Isabel often ended in arguments that were noticeable to their neighbors. Over time, he became increasingly aware of the mistreatment Pierina was facing, and his concern deepened. Eventually, it became clear that Isabel's verbal abuse had escalated into physical violence. With Pierina being punished severely for minor mistakes, Pierina started to feel responsible for her troubled relationship with her mother. Once, she even wrote Isabel a heartfelt letter for Mother's Day, expressing her love and asking for forgiveness for her supposed misbehavior. Unfortunately, this gesture did not change Isabel's behavior. Instead, the situation worsened. Shortly afterward, Pierina reported her mother to the police, claiming that Isabel had hit her in the head with a brick and physically assaulted her. However, her complaint did not lead to any meaningful help or intervention. Pierina's suffering continued largely unnoticed. She endured constant beatings and psychological torment. Isabel rarely took her to school, further isolating her from potential support systems. The other children in the home, Pierina's younger siblings, also suffered. Isabel had developed a cruel habit of punishing them while they were naked in the bathroom, covering their mouths with clothing to muffle their cries and avoid drawing the attention of neighbors. Realizing the severity of the situation, Alfredo started legal proceedings to gain custody of Pierina. However, the bureaucratic process was slow, and conditions in Isabel's home deteriorated further. Even Bertha could no longer ignore the problem. In April 2009, she took the shocking step of reporting her own daughter to the authorities for abusing Pierina. As a result of these serious allegations, the authorities stripped Isabel of her custody rights and temporarily placed Pierina in the care of Bertha, her maternal grandmother. While this change appeared to offer a fresh start for Pierina, her circumstances did not improve. For reasons that remain unclear, Bertha did not fulfill her responsibilities as a caretaker. Neglecting to prioritize Pierina's education and well-being, Pierina began to miss school frequently, and her absences grew so common that neither her teachers nor classmates found them surprising. In 2010, a formal evaluation revealed that Pierina required the support of a dedicated adult. The evaluation warned that if she remained in her grandmother's care, she could completely disengage from the education system. Most concerning was the report's claim that Bertha might pose an even greater risk to Pierina than Isabel had. One school report indicated that from March to December 2007, Pierina's attendance was inconsistent, with no explanation provided. Another report from the following year revealed that she missed over 30% of her classes without justification. A third report from 2009 showed she attended only 35 school days. A fourth report from 2010 suggested that her academic performance could improve if her attendance issues were addressed. Upon receiving this information, Alfredo took immediate action. He filed an urgent legal request for custody and included several documents to support his case. Based on these findings, the social worker responsible for the case submitted a detailed report recommending that Pierina be placed in her father's custody. Despite the challenges she faced, Pierina remained lively, playful, social, and cheerful. However, her emotional pain was becoming apparent. She often felt sad and shared her experiences of abuse with her teacher. At that time, Alfredo was living with his wife, and the social worker confirmed that their home environment was stable. Alfredo had always fulfilled his financial and emotional responsibilities, was dedicated to providing a better life for his daughter. His efforts began to pay off when the court granted him provisional custody, but he still needed to start legal action against Bertha to obtain full custody. On June 15, 2011, Alfredo officially filed for custody of his child. During the reconciliation hearing, Bertha refused to hand over the child. This led to several weeks of legal disputes, but Alfredo remained determined. He passed 3 psychological evaluations and welcomed numerous home visits from social services. In contrast, Bertha did not show up for her evaluations and failed to bring Pierina, which raised serious concerns. In August of that year, Isabel took her daughter and relocated to Lima after Bertha made an unexpected decision to return the girl to her mother. Isabel and Pierina moved into an apartment in the San Miguel district. At 31, Isabel began dating Jonathan Nieto. She had met at a nightclub, where he claims they first crossed paths during her involvement in escort. Their relationship quickly became tumultuous and violent. Jonathan frequently stayed at the apartment, which exposed Pierina to their escalating fights, often resulting in physical altercations. Meanwhile, on November 3rd, the family court decided to skip the postponed psychological evaluations for Bertha and speed up the custody process in favor of Alfredo. They sent the case to the public prosecutor for a final decision. Before a final decision could be reached, Pierina's ordeal ended in a devastating way. Less than 2 weeks later, on November 14, 2011, a taxi driver in Lima picked up 2 women, one younger and one slightly older. What seemed like a normal ride quickly turned unsettling. During the trip, the 2 women started arguing, and the driver noticed their discussion was concerning how to create an alibi for a recent crime involving a young girl. When the taxi driver dropped them off at their destination, he quickly went to the nearest police station and reported the incident. The police took his report seriously and sent officers to the address the women provided. What they discovered confirmed the driver's worst fears. The police encountered a shocking scene inside the apartment. In the bathroom, they discovered a young girl named Pierina, just 9 years old, lying naked on the cold floor and unresponsive. Her body was marked by severe bruises, and her face had noticeable red blotches. While her mother denied any involvement in Pierina's death, neighbors quickly spoke up, revealing that Isabel had a long history of mistreating her daughter. Many were concerned that something tragic would eventually occur. Within hours of discovering Pierina's body and transporting it to the morgue, Isabel and her boyfriend Jonathan were arrested as the main suspects in the violent murder. The interrogation that followed was lengthy and intense, with Isabel insisting she was innocent. She recounted that on the night of the incident, Jonathan returned home drunk and had scratches on his neck, which sparked a heated argument between them. According to Isabel, after hours of fighting and yelling, Jonathan left the apartment around 6. It was at this point that she revealed she had taken out her anger, not on him, but on her daughter. She claimed to have forcibly removed Pierina from her bed, stripped her of her clothes, shaved her head, and made her take a shower. Afterward, she said she allowed Pierina to return to her room to rest. In her inconsistent account, Isabel tried to blame Jonathan first and then even accused her neighbors. But detectives did not find her credible. Her numerous contradictions and her cold, emotionless behavior shocked even the most seasoned officers. When the news of Pierina's death reached her caregiver, the shock was immense. As the reality sank in, it became clear to everyone that Isabel was to blame. Alfredo, Pierina's father, hurried to Lima as soon as he received the news. Heartbroken, he went directly to the central morgue to claim his daughter's body. Meanwhile, investigators spoke with several neighbors who confirmed Isabel's story about her activities that day. She left around midday and returned a few hours later. None of the neighbors remembered hearing Pierina cry or scream, which added to the eerie atmosphere. Along with the troubling account from the taxi driver and growing discrepancies in Isabel's statements, the judge had very few doubts about the situation. Isabel was officially charged with the murder of her daughter and taken into pretrial custody as the investigation continued. When she was brought to court, a crowd gathered outside, shouting insults at her. Reporters tried to get a comment. The truth was already becoming clear. Forensic evidence and statements from officials revealed a disturbing timeline of events. On that tragic day, Isabel violently attacked her daughter in the shower, covering Pierina's mouth to muffle her cries. This was corroborated by faint marks around Pierina's lips, suggesting smothering. During the assault, Pierina lost consciousness, and Isabel, thinking her daughter was dead, left her lying motionless. The autopsy revealed signs of abuse, leading investigators to believe there was an attempt to stage the scene to implicate someone else in the crime. Forensic experts concluded that the cause of death was suffocation due to obstruction of the airway. Detectives believed Isabel's midday trip outside was a deliberate effort to create an alibi. Jonathan was cleared of any suspicion. As it was shown, he was not in the apartment when the injuries occurred. There was confusion in the media regarding the identity of the woman who accompanied Isabel in the taxi. Some reports named her Bertha, while others called her Angela. Regardless, investigators confirmed that neither woman was involved in Pierina's death. Days later, Pierina's body was brought to Piura. Her father, Alfredo, carried her casket through the streets to her paternal grandmother's home, where a private wake was held, closed to the media. That afternoon at 3:30 p.m., a small funeral service took place. The brutality of Pierina's death shocked the entire nation. Beyond the horrifying crime, the case revealed significant failures in the systems designed to protect children. Many questioned, how could such a tragedy occur under the supervision of social services, and the court's outrage grew among the public. Critics pointed fingers at Bertha, who had legal custody of Pierina, but ultimately returned her to Isabel. Others criticized the family court for dismissing the social worker's urgent recommendation to place Pierina with her father. Alfredo's family announced that they would file formal complaints against Bertha and the judicial officials involved. Pierina's two younger siblings were placed in a child welfare facility where they were to undergo psychological evaluations with their extended family. Eventually, the children were transferred to the National Family Welfare Program. Later that November, Bertha sold her house and moved to Lima, reportedly hoping to distance herself from the events that had occurred. As the legal process progressed, Jonathan chose to speak publicly about his experience. In an interview, he described Isabel as a highly violent person who would use anything available like broomsticks and knives to attack him and possibly others. He also shared a shocking detail. Isabel had convinced him that her children were not actually hers, but were the offspring of a mentally unstable sister who roamed the streets. Jonathan revealed another alarming detail that highlighted the terrible conditions Purina had faced for years. He said that the little girl didn't have any toys at all. Even more troubling, she had to sleep on the floor, lacking both love and the basic comforts that every child deserves. A year and a half after the crime, the trial against Isabel began in March 2013. During the proceedings, several important witnesses testified, including Bertha, Jonathan, Alfredo, and several of Isabel's former partners. They all described Isabel as unfit to be a mother, depicting her as violent, erratic, and emotionally unstable. Their testimonies indicated that she had abused not just Purina, but all of her children. Isabel tried to explain her version of events regarding Purina's death. During her testimony, she became emotional and repeated that she was innocent. Despite her claims, the evidence and witness statements were too strong to ignore. The court convicted her, and the prosecutors asked for the maximum punishment under Peruvian law, which is a life in prison. They also requested about $10,000 in civil compensation for Purina's family. On November 7, 2013, Isabel was sentenced to life in prison. During the final hearing, the court presented results from a psychological evaluation carried out during the investigation. The report indicated that Isabel displayed psychopathic traits, calculated behavior, a concerning lack of empathy, and a total disregard for the emotional pain of others. She was characterized as someone skilled in manipulation, especially towards those she viewed as vulnerable. Her defense team filed an appeal, but the higher court rejected it and maintained the original ruling. The only change is that the sentence will be reviewed after 35 years in 2046. Bertha continued to attribute her daughter's actions to her own difficult history. However, there is no evidence that she faced any legal repercussions for her involvement in the circumstances surrounding Purina's death, even though she was once the legal guardian. With all the information now revealed, the case of Purina Nicole stands out as a tragic example of systemic failure. The brutal murder of Purina Nicole, a 9-year-old girl radiant with kindness and resilience, stands as a heart-wrenching testament to the unimaginable horror of a child abused and killed by her own biological mother. Isabel Mirella Tello Shandovi, Purina's life, filled with love from her father and caregiver, yet shattered by her mother's relentless verbal and physical violence, ended in a tragedy that devastated Peru. Isabel's conviction brings a semblance of justice, but it cannot undo the pain of a daughter betrayed by the one meant to protect her, nor the failures of social services and courts that ignored glaring warning signs. Purina's story is a searing call for urgent reform to ensure no child suffers such betrayal and neglect again. As Alfredo and countless others carry her memory forward, Purina's legacy must drive a fierce commitment to protect every child's right to safety, love, and a future free from harm.
Stacy DeGrandchamp, a 17-year-old high school student from Fort Wayne, dreamed of attending Ball State University to pursue a career in computer technology. As an only child raised by a single mother, Stacy was described as confident, beautiful, and popular. However, her popularity often led to jealousy from others. On August 15, 2002, Stacy attended a party with approximately 20 people. Tragically, the night took a devastating turn when a fight broke out outside the house, leaving Stacy severely injured. She was rushed to the hospital but passed away shortly after. It took 17 years to solve the case, as witnesses were initially unwilling to come forward. In the spring of 2002, Stacy met Brandon Muff, a recent graduate of Fort Wayne High School, at a party. Brandon, who was in his early 20s, had a rebellious bad boy persona that Stacy found irresistible. She quickly fell for him and started spending time with his circle of friends. This group included girls Amanda Richards, Whitney McGee, and Holly Boisvert, who often hosted gatherings at Holly's house. Her home, which included a pool, became a popular hangout spot as her father gave the teens free rein. While Stacy appeared to fit in with the group, her presence reignited old tensions between her and Holly. The conflict between Stacy and Holly traced back to middle school. At an 8th grade pool party at Holly's house, she had mocked and splashed Stacy in front of others, causing Stacy to leave the gathering embarrassed. Although the two seem to have made up over time, old grudges resurface when Stacy joins Holly's group of friends as Brandon's girlfriend. Holly had previously dated Brandon, and while their relationship had ended, she still had lingering feelings for him. Stacy's budding romance with Brandon upset Holly, leading to renewed friction. However, this time Stacy did not let herself be intimidated like before. By the summer of 2002, the tension between Stacy and Holly had escalated. Holly began spreading rumors about Stacy, turning others in the group against her. At the same time, Stacy's relationship with Brandon started to unravel. Realizing she was on the wrong path, Stacy made a pivotal decision just weeks before her senior year of high school. She broke up with Brandon, distanced herself from his crowd, and began focusing on her future. She cut ties with most of the group, apart from a new friend she had made that summer, Abby Oswald. Determined to turn her life around, Stacy began preparing for the college years ahead. Abby, a friend of Brandon, met Stacy through him. On August 15, 2002, they spent the day together. They decided to go to the mall, as Abby was shopping for a prom outfit. Later, Abby suggested they attend a party at Brandon's house, where he lived with his roommate, Justin. Stacy was hesitant at first, but Abby convinced her to go. Around 9:30 p.m., they arrived at the house. Shortly before 11 p.m., the Fort Wayne Police Department, along with firefighters and paramedics, responded to a 911 call from the Guthrie Street area. Earlier, in the early evening, the police were called due to complaints about loud music and a small party. However, they left without further intervention. This time, when emergency responders arrived, they found a young woman lying in the driveway, bleeding from her chest. She was rushed to a trauma center in Fort Wayne, but her injuries proved fatal. Abby later explained to detectives what had transpired. When she and Stacy arrived at the party, Brandon and a woman, Holly, were sitting together on the porch. Stacy confronted Holly, questioning her presence. The argument quickly escalated into a physical fight. They pulled each other's hair, punched, kicked, and rolled on the grass. At one point during the fight, Stacy gained the upper hand and kicked Holly in the head or face. Suddenly, Stacy appeared to lose strength and went limp. At that moment, Brandon intervened. He grabbed Stacy by her ankles and dragged her toward the trash cans. Once in the yard, she managed to stand up and stagger down the driveway, but only a few seconds later, she passed out. Brandon went to check on her, lifted her shirt, and noticed that her bra was soaked in blood. That was when they called 911. Both Holly and Brandon were taken to the police station for questioning. Forensic experts arrived at the scene and taped off the area. They began taking photos and videos of the crime scene. Since Stacy was bleeding from the chest, investigators suspected that a weapon had been used. However, no sharp objects or knives were found in the backyard or driveway. After obtaining a search warrant, detectives entered the house and seized several kitchen knives from the table. Meanwhile, at the hospital, doctors worked in the operating room to save Stacy's life. She had a stab wound to her upper chest and another to her abdomen. Despite their efforts, she succumbed to her injuries. With her death ruled a homicide, the Fort Wayne police began an official investigation. At the station, Holly provided her version of events. She claimed she had no part in Stacy's injuries, stating that they had only argued and fought. Holly denied having a knife and suggested that Stacy might have fallen onto glass in the trash can. Brandon was also interviewed, and his blood-stained shirt was collected as evidence. He claimed he had pulled Stacy by her ankles to break up the fight but didn't realize how hard he had been pulling. He also suggested that she might have been injured by broken glass from the trash can. However, Holly and Brandon's statements didn't align with the evidence. Photos of the crime scene showed no broken glass in or around the trash cans. Moreover, there was no blood near them. The coroner's report confirmed that Stacy's injuries were caused by a sharp knife blade, as they were clearly stab wounds. Nevertheless, no knife was found at the scene or on Holly and Brandon at the time. They were then released, but the investigation into Stacy's death remained ongoing. On August 19, 2002, Stacy was laid to rest, dressed in the outfit she had planned to wear for her prom photo. Her funeral was crowded, with many of her friends from parties attending: Abby, Whitney, and Amanda. Notably absent was Holly, but Brandon attended, drawing everyone's attention. His presence surprised many, as rumors were swirling at Wayne High School that he and his friends had manipulated Stacy into attending the party where Holly could confront her. This raised suspicions among investigators about whether the incident was a premeditated plot by Holly to harm Stacy. Following Stacy's death, Holly became a social outcast as most people believed she was responsible. However, another rumor implicated Whitney. A few days before Stacy's death, Whitney had left a message on Stacy's answering machine, advising her to be careful. When a detective questioned Whitney about the message, she insisted it wasn't a threat but rather a warning. Whitney claimed she knew Holly wanted to pick a fight with Stacy and hoped to prevent the two from encountering each other. While Whitney may have been trying to keep Stacy and Holly apart, Brandon seemed to do the opposite. Whitney revealed to detectives that Brandon had called Holly on August 15th and pressured her to attend the party, warning her that if she didn't come, he would never speak to her again. Investigators began considering whether he had orchestrated the situation to provoke a confrontation between Holly and Stacy. She had just broken up with Brandon, which had hurt his self-esteem. Detectives speculate that revenge, combined with Holly's jealousy, may have led to Stacy's death. Abby, Stacy's new friend, played a significant role in convincing her to attend the party. Abby encouraged Stacy to go because she was friends with Brandon. Investigators later questioned Abby's motives, wondering why she would push Stacy to attend the party at the Guthrie Street house when Holly might be there. They suspected that she could have been involved in a plan to put Stacy in harm's way. However, Abby denied any involvement and claimed that she had actually tried to stop the fight that occurred that night. The investigation eventually shifted its focus to Brandon, leading detectives to speak with his roommate, Justin. On August 26, Justin was interviewed by law enforcement and became a key witness. He stated that when he had tried to break up the fight between Stacy and Holly, Brandon had stopped him and told him to let them fight, as if Brandon had been enjoying the confrontation. He also revealed that Brandon later asked him to tell the police that Holly hadn't done anything and that Stacy had simply fallen. This statement made detectives extremely suspicious. They believed Brandon might know important details but was either too scared to share them or deliberately trying to hinder their investigation. Brandon was questioned again, but during his second interview, he refused to provide any new information. He claimed he wasn't a snitch and denied seeing Holly with a knife. Detectives were convinced that Holly was responsible for the crime, but no witnesses were willing to admit they had seen anything, and no murder weapon was ever found. Without these crucial pieces of evidence, the authorities were unable to charge or arrest anyone. As time passed, weeks, months, and eventually years, the case went cold. 17 years after Stacy's death, no one had been held accountable, and no progress had been made in solving the case. It remained unsolved, leaving everyone involved frustrated and confused. Stacy's cousin, Jamie McMillan, refused to let the case fade into obscurity. Determined to find justice, Jamie reached out to Detective Brian Martin, who specialized in unsolved cases. In March 2019, Jamie urged Detective Martin to revisit the case. She suggested interviewing Brandon, Holly, Abby, and Amanda again, hoping that, with the passage of time, the witnesses might be more willing to talk and share the truth. Everyone who had attended the party that night was now older, and perhaps they had reflected on their lives and would finally provide new information that could advance the investigation. Detective Martin begins questioning Abby, who continues to deny ever seeing the knife, just as she did 17 years ago. Next, he interviewed Brandon, who appeared deeply remorseful and admitted the incident had weighed on him for years. However, Brandon also stated that he couldn't recall seeing Holly with a knife. About a month later, Detective Martin located Holly in Wisconsin. Holly was initially hesitant to open the door, but when she eventually did, Detective Martin introduced himself and explained that he was investigating an unsolved case. Holly turned visibly pale. When the detective asked whether she remembered the party, their conversation quickly revealed some surprising details. During their discussion, Holly repeatedly referred to Stacy as her friend. Holly admitted they had been difficult teenage girls, but Stacy was still her friend. She firmly stated that she would never intentionally harm Stacy or threaten Stacy with a knife. She then admitted that she had owned a folding knife at the time and usually carried it for protection. When the detective asked if she had the knife with her during the fight with Stacy, Holly left the room and returned with the very same knife in hand. Detective Martin was shocked. He believed it could potentially be the weapon that had eluded investigators for 17 years. Back in Fort Wayne, Detective Martin began gathering additional information. Although initial test results showed that Stacy's DNA was not found on Holly's knife, the detective conducted further analysis. He later consulted Dr. Wagner, the chief pathologist on the case, who reviewed Stacy's autopsy photos. Wagner concluded that the knife was consistent with the stab wounds Stacy had suffered. On March 25, 2020, Holly, who was now 33 years old, was arrested. After years of silence, Amanda, a friend and the main witness, finally decided to speak up. She had been with Holly the night of the party and revealed that Holly had a knife with her that evening. She recalled Holly bringing the knife along when they arrived at the house and asking Amanda to hold it in her purse. Later, as she and another friend, Whitney, were preparing to leave, Holly asked for the knife back. Amanda saw nothing unusual about this and handed it over. As Amanda and Whitney were leaving, Stacy arrived at the house. Although Amanda remained silent for nearly 2 decades, her testimony could have helped the police solve the case much sooner. With Amanda's statement and additional evidence, authorities were able to reconstruct the incident leading up to Stacy's death. At the center of this tragic story was Brandon, a former graduate of Fort Wayne High School. He was the quintessential bad boy and, despite his flaws, attracted Stacy. Their relationship marked a turning point in Stacy's life, as she became involved with Brandon's social circle, a group known for their partying. Holly, who had dated Brandon before Stacy, still harbored feelings for him. Her lingering affection, coupled with Brandon's manipulative tendencies, deepened her resentment toward Stacy. He enjoyed the attention and often fostered rivalry between Holly and Stacy, which fueled his ego. This animosity came to a head on August 15, 2002. Stacy had received an invitation to a party despite her friends' concerns about its location. She chose to attend anyway. When she arrived, she found Holly with Brandon, further escalating the tension. An argument broke out and quickly turned violent. When Holly realized she was losing the fight, she stabbed Stacy twice with the knife. After years of investigation and consultation with Stacy's family, the Allen County Circuit Court offered Holly a plea bargain. She confessed to stabbing Stacy, which caused Stacy's death, and insisted that neither Brandon nor anyone else was involved. She acted alone. On January 14, 2022, Holly Boisvert was sentenced to 25 years in prison as part of the plea agreement, with 5 years suspended and 3 years of probation. Accounting for the time she has already served in credits for good behavior, she could be released as early as 2030.